adventures, starting with American TV series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 Makeup Fee. Okay, thank you very much. Locke hung up, wrote down a phone number, and said to Rachel, "This is the number of the manager of XX company. When you go there tomorrow, tell them you're Miss Fallon Carrington. They'll find you a position, but it'll probably just be an ordinary clerk. That's okay." After all the failed job searches she'd seen in the past few days, Rachel had already lowered her expectations. Even a modest position was a pleasant surprise. She hugged Locke and kissed him. "Thank you, Locke. It's just a small thing, just to make up for the gift you didn't give her." Locke shrugged. "Dress formally for the interview tomorrow, preferably something formal." Of course, at this point, Rachel looked hesitantly at Monica. She'd run away from the wedding in her wedding dress and had been refusing to go home. She couldn't even afford to buy clothes, so she had to borrow Monica's for now. "I don't have any suitable formal clothes here," Monica said, feeling a little embarrassed. She was a chef, not an office clerk, so she wouldn't need them, and naturally, she didn't have any. Locke knew Rachel was struggling financially, so he said, "If you don't have one, I can take you to buy one. You can pay me back when you get your paycheck." He'd actually been eager to see the 90s American Sweetheart drag show, so he naturally offered his suggestion. "Great, let's go now." Rachel jumped up excitedly, ran back to her room, changed into a new outfit, and then dragged Locke out of the apartment. Since they were going out to buy clothes, they naturally couldn't just buy one formal outfit, they needed at least two. But Locke went ahead and ordered three. One of the outfits was no longer wearable for the evening's event, so Rachel finally got her wish and fulfilled her wild night out. After experiencing it firsthand, Locke had to admit that the American Sweetheart drag show was captivating. Over the next few days, Rachel's winning cheerleading dress and the wedding dress she wore at the wedding were all incredibly novel experiences for Locke. "Honey, what are you thinking about?" Rachel, finally recovering from her shock, asked, leaning against Locke's chest. "I was thinking about your clothing allowance, dear," Locke said with a smile. "Clothing allowance?" "Yes," Locke said, handing Rachel a check. "Wow." Rachel took a look at the check. $5,000, "Yeah, so you can buy some clothes we both like, something that will make us both happy," Locke said, turning over. It was time for the second round of the night. The next morning, Locke arrived at a cafe and met Damon and his daughter, who were already waiting there. They were both in good spirits. Damon had recently traveled extensively around Europe with Mindy, and they had a wonderful Christmas together. Upon returning to New York, he contacted Locke immediately. Seeing Locke's true face for the first time, Damon was surprised by his youth. "This should be our first official meeting, Locke Lee." "Nice to meet you." Locke shook Damon's hand. Mindy's face was filled with joy. She hadn't expected Daredevil to be so young and handsome. They chatted for a while, and Locke briefly explained his situation with the security company. "So you've decided to work for me," Locke said with a smile. "After being a police officer for so many years, I've gotten used to some things, and I feel like working in a security company is not bad," Damon said. "Welcome, my friend. I'm sure we'll have a pleasant cooperation." Locke smiled and looked at Mindy. "And of course, you, Mindy, you're even cooler than I thought, but compared to Daredevil, I think you're more suited to the nickname Batman," Mindy said. "You're both rich, and you're superheroes. I'm not a superhero, and this country doesn't need vigilantes. I just happen to be dealing with Damek." Locke shook his head. "When we first met, I was going to rescue the girl who had been captured by that gang of traffickers. I didn't expect to run into you. I was just trying to help you out of kindness, but on our first transaction, we ran into Damek's killers. I figured, since we've made an enemy, I might as well eliminate them. I just wanted to keep myself and those around me safe, not become a vigilante, and I hope you won't do that either." Locke made up this excuse. He didn't want Damon and his daughter to become vigilantes again if nothing else happened, especially Mindy. Being a vigilante wasn't a good job in this country. Even if vigilantes were discovered, the FBI might abandon pursuit of some criminals and instead target the vigilantes, a completely thankless task. If the plot in comics unfolded exactly as they did, Mindy would continue her vigilante activities after avenging Damon and eliminating Damek, ultimately landing her incarceration and seemingly escaping. This kind of life might sound cool in the movies, but after experiencing it, no one would want to live a life of constant uncertainty. Damon understood Locke's words. As a police officer, he had witnessed many of the federal government's maneuvers. Mindy, however, was a bit more idealistic and didn't fully agree with Locke's words. This problem could only be solved gradually. Locke assigned Damon to run the security company, believing he was more trustworthy than the other recruits. The father and daughter lived in Fairview, becoming Locke's neighbors. Locke also connected Mindy with a nearby private high school. They didn't have to worry about buying a house or paying tuition. Not only did Locke pay Damon, but the funds he received from Damek were more than enough for them to live comfortably. Compared to New York, where criminals are concentrated, Fairview is much more peaceful, with a much lower risk of encountering serious crime. This also helped to somewhat limit Mindy's vigilante tendencies. Schooling here, along with Locke and Damon's guidance, helped her overcome her childish heroic fantasies. For a while, Locke's life settled into a routine. Weekdays, he attended classes and took exams at Princeton University. Weekends, he would go to New York to handle company matters, meet with Monica and the others, occasionally embark on a quest, or attend high-class cocktail parties to network. Time slipped by unnoticed. With the progress of his classes and the release of Lord of Mysteries, Locke gained potential points at a much faster rate than before. Just before summer vacation, Locke successfully raised his agility to 200 points, but the system remained unchanged. Locke could only wait and see how his strength improved. He had a hunch that once his strength reached 200, the system would undergo a radical change. Chapter 127 Sheldon wants to be a writer. Peggy ultimately refused to change her mind, so Locke began teaching her meditation techniques. He discovered a remarkable talent for magic, and within 2 days, she had mastered the art. From then on, Peggy set aside time every evening to complete her meditation practice. As for the various magical skills, Locke planned to gradually teach her in a few years, once she turned 16. After finishing breakfast and packing up to leave for school, Locke and Peggy saw Ashley and Gabrielle chatting at the door. "What are you talking about? Gabe needs help with something," Ashley said, giving Gabrielle a look. Gabrielle quickly replied, well, just yesterday, I had a little conflict with Solis's lawyer, Doyle. He's unable to represent him, and I was wondering if you had any suitable lawyers you could recommend to me." "So, Mr. Solis needs a new defense attorney?" Locke asked. "That's right," Gabrielle said. "You're the richest person I know. You must know some very capable lawyers." Hearing Gabrielle's words, Locke understood that this was the conflict that had arisen because the lawyer in the story refused to help Gabrielle apply for a couple's apartment. He thought for a moment and said, "I can recommend a suitable lawyer for you. He should be able to help Carlos get early parole, but he'll be asking a lot of money." "Okay, he's the one. I'll take him to see Carlos," Gabrielle said. "Okay, I'll give you his contact information," Locke said, writing down a phone number and handing it to Gabrielle. After Gabrielle left, Locke and Peggy drove to the school. The semester was almost over, and all the students were busy preparing for final exams, so they were attending classes more diligently. Locke and Peggy sat down in their usual seats. A little later, little Sheldon arrived on time. However, he did not immediately open his suitcase to take out his textbooks and notes. Instead, he said to Locke, "Locke, how much money can you make from writing novels? Why are you talking about this suddenly?" Locke looked at little Sheldon and said in surprise, "Aren't you not interested in money?" "I'm indeed not interested in money," little Sheldon frowned and said, "but when I contacted my family recently, Missy told me about our family's predicament on the phone, and finally said dejectedly that we are white trash. I know that doesn't include me. You know, I'm a college student at a prestigious university with a full scholarship. I can never be trash. But considering that they are my family, I decided to use my genius brain to help them get out of their current situation. Because even if it was just Missy saying it, I don't like it. It seems that your family is in trouble, Sheldon." Locke seemed thoughtful. "That's right." Young Sheldon unhesitatingly recounted every embarrassing incident in his family. "Without my mathematical skills to help him devise plays, my dad's football team underperformed for a long time. As a result, the parents who sponsored the team began to question his leadership abilities. The school, taking these parents' wishes into account, expelled him. Although he claimed to have resigned on his own initiative, he lost his job and now works part-time at my grandmother's boyfriend's store. And my brother, George, JR allowed teenage hormones to take over his behavior and got a girl almost 10 years his senior pregnant, who refused to marry him. Because of this, our family was about to have a child out of wedlock. And my mother was expelled from the church. Then, to earn money for baby formula for his future child, George Jr. persuaded my grandmother to drive with him to Mexico to smuggle cigarettes. After being caught, they not only spent a night in jail but were also fined $2,500. These problems combined, our family's income has dropped significantly, but its expenditure has increased a lot. According to my calculations, our family's deposits cannot support this year's Christmas. So that's the case, then do you need help? Paige said, Locke and I are happy to help, after all, we are friends. You are not friends. Little Sheldon said very honestly, you just like me, especially Locke. Paige smiled and said, Locke usually likes to tease you, but as long as you are willing to speak, he is still willing to help. It's impossible. Sheldon Jr. said angrily, since I went to college, the most bully I have received comes from Locke, who is the supervillain in the comics. At this point, little Sheldon suddenly noticed Locke staring at him, and his voice fell down. But soon, he thought of something and raised his head and said, although the situation at home is not good, I still have my genius mind. Soon all this will disappear under my wisdom. Peggy showed an interesting look after hearing this. She also wanted to know what she would think of to make a fortune and whether she would choose to calculate the lottery like her. Ever since she suddenly got the urge to start counting lottery tickets last Christmas, even just playing around in her free time has earned her millions. With the help of Locke, now a billionaire with established connections in New York, Peggy hasn't run into any problems. The Lottery Association, upon learning of her situation, even invited Peggy to become a consultant, offering her a generous monthly salary, with the sole condition that she stopped buying lottery tickets. It's safe to say that Peggy is now a well-off woman. Sheldon could do the same thing. Even if he doesn't count lottery tickets, if Peggy helps out, the Lottery Association is confident they'll offer him a consulting position. With this consultant's salary, Sheldon's family problems will be solved. However, neither Peggy nor Locke offered to help until Sheldon asked. This was simply a matter of attitude. Sheldon is the type to take any help for granted. If he wasn't asked, he'd end up doing a thankless job, and no one wants that. With little Sheldon's pride, it was difficult for him to give in. He continued, although my family has fallen into an economic crisis due to various problems, and Missy has to think about how to make money to save the family, they are unlikely to succeed. I am the only one who can do this. Next, I will make a grand appearance like a superhero to solve my family's difficulties. These days, I will divert my energy from scientific research. With a little thought, I have a solution to this trouble, and a complete solution to get my family out of poverty. It seems you are very confident. Peggy looked at the proud little Sheldon, and was also curious about what ideas he would say. Tell me about it. My current plan is to become a writer and write a book describing a brave and fearless captain of a spaceship with the strongest wisdom. He travels between the stars, goes to civilizations on the verge of extinction, and uses his wisdom to help these civilizations solve the crisis of extinction. Chapter 128 Miss Lee is better than you. Sheldon actually wants to write a novel. Locke and Peggy exchanged a glance, both finding it a bit absurd. Are you serious? Peggy couldn't help but ask. Of course, my first thought was to write a script. I love Star Trek and I'm eager to see my story on TV. Plus, the show is so famous, so I figured it would make a lot of money. So I wrote it right away and showed it to Leonard right away. I needed to make sure my script was accessible to even the most simple-minded. Besides my family, Leonard was the only person in my social circle who fit that bill, and he happened to be a Star Trek fan. So I pitched him my idea, but he doubted it. To make my story accessible to the average person, I had to lower my own brain frequency to normal level. But if someone as simple-minded as Leonard was skeptical, I knew it was hard for anyone else to understand my brilliant idea. Alfred, who was listening in on the whole thing, then remarked that in the entertainment industry, a single screenplay is often the work of multiple screenwriters. After considering it, I didn't mind using my supreme wisdom to lead them, but Alfred said screenwriters were the lowest paid in Hollywood, forcing me to abandon the idea. So I decided to try a different approach. Since no matter how I lowered my IQ, the content I wrote wouldn't be comprehensible to someone as simple-minded as Leonard. Furthermore, screenwriter income clearly didn't meet my needs for improving my family's financial situation. So, I decided to write a science fiction novel that even scientists could understand. In the novel, the protagonist will use scientific theories to solve the problems faced by civilizations, thus preventing their destruction. I heard you earn a lot as an author. After the novel is finished, I'm sure I'll earn more royalties than you, thus preventing my family from becoming what Missy calls white trash. Hey, Sheldon, Locke couldn't help but say, do you think anyone would read a novel like this? Why not? My novel is rich in scientific knowledge, so scientists can learn more from it. That's right, little Sheldon was just that proud. Hardcore science fiction basically has no future. Not to mention that ordinary people won't read things that they can't understand at all. Locke interrupted Sheldon and said, even if you are a professional scientist, if you want to learn scientific theories, you can just read the relevant books. You currently don't have any original scientific theories that are good enough to write in novels. Let those scientists study them specifically. These words choked Sheldon. Facing Locke and Peggy, he couldn't tell a lie that would be easily exposed by them, so he could only say, it seems that I can only choose plan B. Do you have a plan B? Peggy asked. That's right, although I don't like this plan either, because it will also make Locke even richer. Young Sheldon raised his chin proudly. I have a brilliant idea. Why is $1 worth $1? Because people give it value. We can create our own digital currency, assigning values to hard-to-find numbers and storing them in a computer database. Then we can design an algorithm to mine these numbers. Then we can encourage people to switch from government-backed currencies to digital currency. This is brilliant. I'll be rich, so you're planning to have me invest and help you complete your idea? Locke glanced at young Sheldon. Yes, to complete this idea. You'll need to invest in a mainframe computer. I've already budgeted it, and a brand new one will only cost $500,000. Young Sheldon looked at Locke. If you're willing to invest in my idea, you'll definitely make a fortune from my brilliant idea. Digital currency is indeed the future trend. Locke nodded. So you're planning to invest? Young Sheldon said happily. If he didn't know many wealthy people, he wouldn't have wanted Locke to invest. Beverly had already bluntly rejected his idea, saying that as a researcher, she wouldn't have any financial entanglements with her research subjects, as this would prevent the research results from being skewed. So, of the people he knew, Locke was the only one who could come up with the money. Of course not. Locke shook his head decisively. Why? Little Sheldon couldn't help but exclaim, this idea is obviously very promising. You just said it's a future trend. With your intelligence, why would you reject it? The reason is simple. For this digital currency to be profitable, it must wait until society reaches a sufficient level of development. Locke said, that's the timeline measured in years, and at the earliest, it'll take a decade or two. This process requires a tremendous investment of time and money, and the cost of investing at this point is beyond imagination. With so much time to spare, not counting subsequent investments, I could have made much more money with just the $500,000 I'd spend on a mainframe computer. To me, the investment and the rewards are simply not proportional. And before this project turns a profit, according to you, your family will be bankrupt before Christmas this year. Damn it, little Sheldon cursed in exasperation. And your so-called genius idea isn't original at all. It's actually been practiced and summarized by predecessors. What do you mean it's not original? Who could have thought of it and put it into practice before me? Little Sheldon said defiantly, that's impossible. Go to the library and borrow an economics book. Read its explanation of currency and you'll understand. Our ancestors defined currency through everyday economic activities. The reason we still use paper money and coins is simply because they're more suitable for circulation at this stage of social development. Your so-called digital currency is simply a transformation and utilization of that knowledge, Locke said. At this stage, we define the dollar as paper currency. In the future, as society continues to develop and the internet becomes more widespread, people will enter the digital age. You don't need to explain your so-called genius idea. People will naturally define the dollar as digital currency because it's more convenient and less expensive. Little Sheldon was completely speechless. The theoretical knowledge was already written in books. Locke said he was simply utilizing theories that were already being used and summarized by predecessors, which left him speechless. You're only good at theoretical research. In my opinion, little George is much more sensitive to making money than you are. Even among the three of you, Missy knows how to make more money better than you do. She wouldn't think that a seemingly high-sounding solution that takes a long time to implement can immediately solve your family's difficulties. Impossible. Little Sheldon couldn't accept that Locke ranked him last among the three siblings, but he didn't know how to refute Locke's words. Peggy couldn't help laughing as she listened nearby and said, "Sheldon, if you ask me for help, maybe I can help you find a way to make money." No. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Big Trouble. The end of the semester's final exams marked a year since Locke arrived at the university. News of the volatile economic situation in Europe had spread even to ordinary people, and some self-proclaimed smart individuals were hastily preparing to invest their money there. Risks aside, the true tycoons had already laid out their plans, quietly waiting for the situation to unfold, poised to reap the biggest slice of the action. It was this battle that brought Soros and the quantum funds fame to the masses, but among the many tycoons, he was just one of the most ordinary. It was simply the need to promote the quantum fund, and the need for someone to shoulder the blame for the other tycoons behind the scenes. This time, the success of the attack on the British pound belonged solely to him. With only 2 or 3 months until his year-long plan would bear fruit, Locke needed to make some preparations, primarily regarding how to spend his earnings and effectively avoid taxes. "I've established a charitable foundation and invested in an orphanage to take in homeless children," Locke said to Max, who was driving beside him. "I'd like you to be the director of this orphanage." "Me? Are you serious?" Max said. "I've never done anything like this before. I don't have the experience to manage an orphanage." "Listen, Max. Management requires experience, but it's actually easier than you think. I'll assign someone to take care of the finances. All you need to do is focus on taking care of the children. I know you love children, that's what you're good at, isn't it? I just want to help these poor children. You're responsible and someone I trust. Besides, the salary is good enough, and it won't prevent you from enrolling in a community college. I saw a lot of paintings in your house. You must be interested in art." "Thank you, Locke, but I need to think about it." Max was moved by Locke's words, or perhaps she already liked this kind of work. For Locke, this would promote himself and avoid taxes. Hearing Max's tone, Locke knew she was inclined to agree. Just as he was trying to persuade her, he noticed a Ferrari behind him driving crookedly, which made him frown. In the United States, there's no shortage of drunk drivers. In fact, because there are so many drunks, it's quite common. Looking at the blue Ferrari swaying from side to side, the driver must have been quite drunk. "Be careful, Maximum. There should be a drunk driving behind you." Bang! Locke was about to warn Max to be careful when he felt a huge force. The Ferrari behind him directly rear-ended Locke and Max's car. What the hell is going on? Because they were wearing seatbelts, neither of them was in any danger, but Max's advantage was too prominent, and it hurt his chest. After the car stabilized, she unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door, and angrily walked over to the window of the Ferrari behind her. She banged on it, shouting, "Open up, you son of a bitch. How much did you drink? Why didn't you go straight to hell, sir?" At this moment, a car behind them also heard the noise. Several bodyguards approached and said to Locke, "Are you okay, sir?" Locke was now accompanied by bodyguards whenever he went out and came in, but they usually kept a distance to avoid disrupting his life. Now that they noticed what had happened, they immediately rushed over. "Nothing. Call the police and ambulance first." "I'll leave this here," Locke instructed, then approached Max. Through the car window, he saw the man inside had passed out, seemingly unaware of what had happened. "All right, Max, don't bother with a drunk like that. Let's go back. I'll arrange for someone to handle this." Locke grabbed Max and persuaded him. There was really no point in staying and arguing with such a drunk. "Go to hell, bitch." Max gave the car a final kick before Locke pulled him back into the car and drove away. Locke dismissed the incident as a minor incident, but a few hours later, he received a call from Damon. "Locke, that drunk who rear-ended your car yesterday is in big trouble." "Big trouble?" Locke frowned slightly. "Is he some billionaire's relative, or some politician's son?" "No, he's from Mexico," Damon said gravely, then explained the man's identity. The drunk's name was Gabriel Cortes, a member of a Mexican trafficking family. The youngest son of the Cortes family controlled 30% of the flower market in central Mexico. He was cautious, ruthless, and generous to his subordinates. As a trafficker, he had few loopholes to exploit. He preferred to stay at home, his only hobby being racing, and he would occasionally use a false identity to compete in races across America. His presence here was, in fact, somewhat related to Locke. Because the New York tycoon demic was busted by Locke and Damon, the price of flour in New York City has skyrocketed by 50% to 60%, prompting many flour suppliers to target the area. Gabriel had come to New York to oversee his subordinates' negotiations with local syndicates. He was cautious in his New York presence, using a false identity and remaining hidden during business negotiations. Yesterday, after concluding a business deal in New York, he and his subordinates celebrated with him, got drunk, and went for a drive alone, resulting in a rear-end collision. Gabriel had been carefully guarded, but his sudden departure was unexpected, and by the time his subordinates found him, he was already unconscious and had been rushed to the hospital. Before the bodyguards could verify their identities, they encountered one of Gabriel's men. In their haste to the hospital, the bodyguards spotted the gun hanging from their waistbands, leading to a confrontation. The hospital was already policed, and the incident quickly attracted their attention. Before Gabriel's men could rescue the victim, the police had already surrounded the hospital. Gabriel's men grabbed the hostages and escaped the hospital, but Gabriel, still in a coma, wasn't so lucky and was caught red-handed by the police. Locke's two bodyguards, one dead and one injured, were found dead. The police verified Gabriel's identity and finally recognized him, and he was taken to the New York Police Department overnight. Shortly after Damon's call, Martha, the head of the New York City Major Crimes Unit, approached Locke and questioned him about the previous night. Chapter 130, Eliminating the Roots. So it was just a coincidental rear-end collision. I never imagined that drunk guy was actually a Mexican trafficker. Locke was also somewhat frustrated. This was simply an unprovoked disaster. Very good, we understand the situation. Thank you for your cooperation. Martha was also Locke's acquaintance. After confirming that Locke was not lying, she ended her questioning, but finally warned Locke, those Mexican traffickers are extremely ruthless and like to vent their anger on others. You must be careful for the time being. I understand, Locke nodded. Unlike the traffickers in the United States, the Mexican traffickers are far more dangerous. These traffickers in western Zhejiang have suffered numerous losses at the hands of the elite-trained anti-drug forces. They have grown rapidly and have set their sights on these anti-drug forces, trained like the elite of the military. Using threats of money, death, parents, wives, and children, they have recruited many elites who have been forced to submit for various reasons. This group is trained like special forces and equipped with equipment comparable to regular troops. It can be said that they are constantly strengthening their spear and shield. Moreover, unlike the traffickers in New York, who were often wary, these Mexican traffickers were ruthless, and they were likely to vent their anger on Locke. He might not have worried about his own safety after the attack, but the people around him were. After Martha and her men left, Locke immediately contacted Damon, asking him to expand the security company's staff and recruit more elite members. He also began to mobilize his channels, preparing to investigate the other party's background and be fully prepared. Over the next 2 days, the NYPD was on full alert, while the FBI also appeared and began to negotiate with the NYPD, trying to get Gabriel to hand him over. This gave Gabriel's men time to prepare and formulate a plan to rescue their boss. On the morning of the day Locke learned the news, a police officer, under duress due to a $100,000 payment and the safety of his family, secretly slipped a note to Gabriel, who had regained consciousness. Meanwhile, Locke had received news from the hospital that the two bodyguards who had accompanied Gabriel to the hospital had been stabbed to death in their beds. Even the homes of two bodyguards were caught in the fire, their wives and children destroyed. The experiences of these two bodyguards made Locke wary. These Mexican traffickers were indeed reckless. If Gabriel wasn't eliminated immediately, there was no telling when Locke or those around him would be in danger. As long as the Cordes family wasn't completely wiped out, a series of revenge killings could ensue. If Gabriel was eliminated, his brothers, parents, and other relatives might all retaliate. Having grasped this, Locke began to consider heading to Mexico to eradicate the problem. This time, he wasn't prepared to act alone. After all, the situation in Mexico was complex, and who knew what might happen? It would be better to recruit a small team of elite soldiers. These days, $100,000 would definitely secure the services of elites like Navy SEALs and Green Berets. Organizing these 8 individuals into 4 or 5 combat teams would only cost $3 or $4 million. Adding in equipment, intelligence, and compensation, $10 million would be enough to make them willing to raid any trafficker's stronghold. Let these people lead the operation and navigate the minefields, while he, along with Damon and Vanessa, intervene as needed. If successful, he would surely reap a large sum of cash, gold, and jewelry, perhaps even a substantial profit. Of course, this would require concealing their identities. The personnel involved in the operation were simply engaged in a business transaction and could not recruit security companies. Otherwise, if any of them slipped through the net, information leaks would cause trouble. Locke was determined, and the mission arrived. Eliminate the Cordes family, offering an immediate reward of 1,200 potential points. As expected, they were a major Mexican trafficking family. With the mission, Locke's resolve only grew. If the Cordes family didn't die, who would? Even if they had money, could they still rival his current strength? First, gather intelligence to determine how many members of the Cordes family there were. Eliminate as many as he could find, and send their entire family to the group. It was just a matter of money, and he didn't believe that $10 or $20 million wouldn't be enough to wipe out the Cordes. If not, he'd double it. He wasn't afraid of these guys' attacks at all. At worst, he could just arrange for his people to hide anywhere in the world. The Cordes family couldn't leave Mexico, or even remain invisible for long. Once these traffickers lost their business, their numerous underlings would quickly defect to new owners, some of whom would seek revenge against them. Thinking of this, Locke remembered a lead who had contacted him some time ago. He recalled the phone number and quickly made contact. The Continental Hotel was ostensibly a well-established establishment, but secretly it was affiliated with the High Table, a global assassin organization with a presence in the United States. American assassins would take assignments at the Continental Hotel. Locke had only learned of their existence from information in Sloane's office during the textile factory raid. At the time, Locke hadn't considered contacting them. Unexpectedly, as his fame grew, the Continental Hotel extended an olive branch, sending someone to contact him, offering to help Locke eliminate those they wanted. Clearly, the Continental Hotel's global reach stems from connections with powerful figures in various countries, perhaps relying on their services to these influential figures to secure certain privileges in their respective jurisdictions. According to Continental Hotel's rules, upon receiving a mission, the hotel assesses the mission's danger level and determines a price. The employer pays the fee, and then Continental Hotel will do everything in its power to eliminate the target. If one assassin fails, a more skilled assassin will be assigned to continue the task, continuing until the target is confirmed dead or the employer cancels the mission. Of course, if the employer cancels the mission, the payment will not be refunded. The cancellation policy demonstrates that the assassin group is not omnipotent, and Continental Hotel needs to maintain a fallback, demonstrating its flexibility. After all, if assassins are repeatedly dispatched, and even the most skilled assassins fail to complete the mission, no assassin will dare to accept the same assignment again. At this point, it's impossible to risk the entire organization, so the only option is to return to the employer for negotiation. Even if the employer is adamant. After careful consideration, the employer might target the assassin themselves, seeking reconciliation and offering various terms. The 12 elders of the High Table are also human beings. Most of them belong to families with relatives, friends, and family businesses, so they naturally fear that their targets will transfer their hatred to them. Furthermore, they carefully consider many targets from the upper class and will not easily accept orders. The upper class itself has certain unspoken rules. When encountering conflicts, they generally do not resort to assassination or other means, as such extreme measures can easily provoke widespread hostility. After all, if everyone breaks the rules and kills each other, everyone's safety will be in jeopardy. At this level, who doesn't have the money to hire assassins? Therefore, the reason why this seemingly prestigious assassin organization can thrive is actually because the powerful need tools that can help them eliminate targets without getting their hands dirty. Most of the time, the Continental Hotel's targets are ordinary people, gang members, or newly wealthy people with limited connections. They rarely dare to provoke the well-established powerful. Now that Locke can be considered a member of the powerful, it is for this reason that the Continental Hotel has taken the initiative to approach them and try to establish friendly relations. In addition to the Continental Hotel, Locke contacted a killer from a killer company through Damon. The killer was a friend Damon had known a few years ago, and he felt more secure. Chapter 131 Birthday Party. These two are my bodyguards. From now on, they'll be with you wherever you go. At the Meagingtown Villa, Locke introduced the two men to Peggy and Ashley. Since they had decided to fight the Cordes family to the bitter end, they had to ensure the safety of those around them. In addition to personal bodyguards, Locke also increased the intensity of covert protection. Tang Wei and Max also enjoyed similar services. Locke also prepared special protective magic items for them. Why the sudden arrangement of personal protection? Ashley couldn't help but ask. Peggy quickly analyzed the situation and asked, "Is it a business rival or a politician, you mean?" Ashley finally understood. "Don't worry about it. It will be over soon," Locke said solemnly. You don't need to worry too long. Although they didn't like having someone around them all the time, since Locke had given them such instructions, they accepted. After making arrangements, Locke went to Mr. Ipez's home alone. This time, he had invited him to his birthday party and taste the red wine from the O'Brien winery that he had just acquired. By the time Locke arrived, the guests had almost all arrived, more than 20 in total. Most were around Mr. Ipez's age, accompanied by wives or female companions. Most of these people were also wealthy, similar in size to Mr. Ipez, with fortunes of at least tens of millions. Some were accompanied by their gray-haired wives, while many had female companions in their 20s. Before the crowd, Mana Ipez appeared dignified and elegant, a stark contrast to the impression Locke had made that night. She resembled what Eastern proverbs call a noble woman. Mr. Ipez had invited a band to accompany the singing. A professional sommelier, following a strict procedure, prepared Mr. Ipez's prepared red wine and began to decanter it. The guests chatted in groups of 3 or 4. Locke didn't recognize any of the guests, but someone still approached him. "You're the investment genius Ipez mentioned, right? My name is Charles. I saw you and Mana jogging together this morning when I was here before. Women like her are simply the best." As they chatted, Mr. Charles's eyes wandered over Mana Ipez, a glint of fascination in his eyes. "I did have many opportunities to go jogging with Mana when I lived nearby," Locke said calmly, sipping his red wine. "How enviable. I don't have the luxury of jogging with Mana every day," Mr. Charles said. "I'm a gynecologist. My wife was a high school classmate of Mr. Ipez's. She lives a little further away, but I often come here for parties." Locke remained silent. Charles was in his 30s, and considering Mr. Ipez was almost 60, his high school classmate was probably around the same age. He was indeed a smart guy, having long recognized the benefits of a wealthy woman. His career as a gynecologist was likely due to his wife's financial support, as studying medicine in the United States was quite expensive. Judging from his appearance, there must be plenty of people eyeing Mana Ipez, but Mana delivered directly to their doorstep. Apparently, good looks are a real advantage. Mr. Charles then launched into a long-winded introduction to his yacht. "That's my treasure. It's 70 feet long, with a mini-bar and Italian-made sheepskin sofas. My wife proposed to me on it. She's always been so kind to me. She even bought me an Aston Martin DB4, a long out-of-production car that drives amazingly well. I was trying to take Mana out for a ride in it the other day, but it didn't work out. But the harder it is to get, the more exciting it is, isn't it?" Locke didn't know what to say. It wasn't uncommon for wealthy men to keep beautiful women, and for wealthy women to seek out young men. Judging by Charles's appearance, he certainly had the financial resources to be a man with a thin appetite. Locke didn't really want to chat much, but most of the guests here were in their 50s and 60s, and the women they brought with them weren't particularly suitable conversation partners. Mr. Charles, who seemed unwilling to put in the effort, was one of the few young men present, but he was surprisingly openly obsessed with Mana Ipez. Fortunately, Locke knew how to address the situation. It's true that with a gynecologist's income, it's difficult to afford such a wonderful yacht. Congratulations on getting your wish. 70 feet is only a relatively average size for a yacht, but gynecologists aren't millionaire surgeons, so buying one is a real challenge. Furthermore, in the United States, the purchase price of toys like airplanes and yachts might not be outrageous, but the maintenance is the real expense. Indeed, every time I see these treasures, I forget all my worries. The other man seemed to be a big talker, or perhaps he'd been holding back for too long and desperately needed someone to confide in. Things were great in the first few years of our marriage. My wife still looks stunning, but now, every time I get the urge to explode, I feel like I'm about to explode. You can imagine what a deflated balloon feels like, right? Locke finally lost control of his expression, and a twitch of his lips finally stopped the uncomfortable image in his mind. Like young Sheldon, he possessed high-definition visual imagery, even capable of mentally deducing the movements and changes of planets. Charles' words truly made him feel uneasy. Charles, seemingly unwilling to recall further memories, stared at Mona Ipez without blinking, clearly unable to endure the prolonged torture. His repressed thoughts were overflowing. It's safe to say that while a rich woman is nice, the age gap is so great that enduring it requires both courage and endurance. Mona Ipez had been watching Locke's movements and was beginning to suspect that Locke and Charles were discussing her, otherwise, Charles wouldn't have glared at him so openly. While casually chatting with Charles, Locke hadn't expected to be noticed by a teacher, who had been probing him, asking if he wanted to visit her house to see her brand new Harley-Davidson. Of course, Locke couldn't torture himself like that. He calmly raised his hand, showcasing the custom-made Patek Philippe on his wrist, effectively giving the other person pause. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Mr. Charles took the initiative to move closer to Mona Ipez, but perhaps because his intentions were too obvious, Mona Ipez seemed a little impatient. She had been paying attention to Locke's movements, and when she saw Locke going to the bathroom, she quickly said hello to Charles' wife and successfully left on the pretext of something. Then she followed Locke in and closed the door, ignoring the guests outside. With decisive actions, she clearly expressed her needs. Compared to the previous night, it was a bit more tense and exciting. There was even someone knocking on the door. After Locke answered that someone was there, they left. There was more than one bathroom in the house, so there was no need to wait outside the door, which made both of them feel relieved. When Locke came out, Mr. Ipez was still chatting and laughing with his friends, and didn't seem to notice that Mona had been gone for quite a while. Chapter 132 Toolman Sheldon. Locke chatted with Mr. Ipez for a while longer, then saw it was almost time to say goodbye and leave. As he drove out of the manor, he saw a man standing near the entrance. Seeing him, Locke became wary, as Guoda's face and signature bald head looked familiar. "I'm Arthur. Damon introduced me here," the man said, approaching the car window and speaking a pre-prepared code word to Locke. "Get in the car," Locke gestured. He hadn't expected the killer friend Damon knew to be an acquaintance. The name Arthur was common, and Locke hadn't thought much of it when Damon mentioned it. He hadn't realized that this Arthur, nicknamed the Mechanic, was the protagonist of a movie he had seen in his previous life. "Our target this time is Gabriel Cordes." Locke reached into his arms, actually pulling out an envelope from his storage compartment, and handed it to Mechanic Arthur. "Here's his basic information. He's currently being held in an NYPD jail, and his men are probably trying to rescue him. Take a look. Damon will pay you the deposit and any rewards if you succeed. If you do well this time, there will be another mission." Arthur nodded, took the envelope, and exited the car without a word. Locke also drove back home. According to the intelligence he had just gathered, the Cordes family currently consists of 4 key figures: Gabriel himself, his brother, his cousin, and his uncle. Gabriel Cordes's father had been killed by enemies years earlier, and it was then that the Gabriel brothers took over the family business. His brother took over the family's main operations in northern Mexico, his cousin followed his brother, Gabriel expanded his influence in central Mexico, and his uncle was in semi-retirement. After meeting with Arthur, Locke instructed Damon to keep a close eye on the NYPD and monitor any unusual activity by the local New York gangs that Gabriel was collaborating with. Damon, a former NYPD alumnus, has connections there. According to intelligence, the FBI appears to be negotiating a deal with the NYPD to hand Gabriel over to them. The Cordes family's traditional markets in the United States primarily include Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, which border Mexico. Police departments, border control teams, and the FBI in these states often have informants paid by the Cordes family, a rite of passage for traffickers in Mexico. Without a strong insider, there's no way to operate in these areas. However, the Cordes family clearly lacks influence in New York. After Damek's death, the Cordes family was invited by local New York gangs to supply them, and their efforts to rescue him would inevitably require collaboration with local gangs. Furthermore, Vanessa shared with Locke a tip: a friend she met in Brazil is familiar with Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and Locke has arranged for her to go there to gather information. Ciudad Juarez is the Cordes family's most important stronghold in northern Mexico, just across the river from the United States. It also serves as a crucial channel for the courties to distribute their goods. Gathering intelligence there is a preparatory step for eliminating the Cortese family, confirming the whereabouts of Gabriel's eldest brother, Martin Cortese, his cousin, Victor Snape, and his uncle, Carlos Cortese. Locke is also considering how to avoid causing trouble when dealing with him. The key is to avoid excessive exposure to the Mexican authorities. The elimination of a single trafficker is unlikely to attract significant attention or investigation. After all, feuds between traffickers are common, and the sudden elimination of major traffickers is not unheard of. Even those corrupt police officers who have been bribed by traffickers might actively investigate while the traffickers are alive, but once they're dead, they will simply try to distance themselves from the matter. For Locke, the key is to avoid excessively provoking the local police, lest they be led astray and trace the clues back to him. Many local police officers are undoubtedly bribed by the Cortese family, and it is crucial to prevent them from causing trouble at a critical moment. If his identity were discovered, trouble wouldn't just come from Mexico. Key among them would be the perception that he was in too much trouble, hindering Locke's future network development. Locke, there's new information from the NYPD. They've reached an agreement with the FBI to hand Gabriel over to the FBI. The specific details of the transfer are still unknown, Damon called. Then get intel quickly. Also, inform Arthur and tell him to prepare. After hanging up, Locke, standing at the airport exit, looked at George Cooper and his family and said, "Sure enough, calling Sheldon's mom had an immediate effect. Didn't you see the way Sheldon begged me? It made me laugh for a long time," Peggy said with a smile. As for Sheldon's final words about the matter not being over, she didn't take them seriously. "So, if we sign this document, we'll get $100,000 in consulting fees every year." George Cooper, holding the document and looking at the representative from the National Lottery Association, felt like something had just fallen from the sky. He was still a little incredulous until he saw the agreement. The family had been struggling financially for various reasons, and the atmosphere had been somewhat strained. Unexpectedly, Peggy called and offered Sheldon a lucrative job. She also explained in detail why the Lottery Association had established a consultant position. To put it simply, they were paying people with mathematical skills to avoid disrupting the market while also recruiting them to work for the Lottery Association. He still believed Sheldon could calculate lottery winnings. After all, he'd helped her calculate odds and devise plays for her football team. Sheldon's grandmother even had him calculate odds and buy spinach to pay off her gambling debts. The consulting fee was substantial. A $100,000 annual income was enough for their family to maintain a comfortable middle-class lifestyle in a place like New York these days, let alone their small town. Besides being pleasantly surprised, he also felt a surge of regret. Why hadn't he thought of this idea sooner? Should he hold off on signing the contract and have Sheldon find a lottery ticket to calculate it later? As the thought raced through his mind, he saw the Lottery Association representative staring intently at him. George immediately realized that Sheldon had been targeted by the Lottery Association. Given the Lottery Association's immense influence, George Cooper quickly put the idea aside. "This is my consulting fee. It's only because I'm not yet of legal age that my guardian has been asked to help sign the contract. You will manage the money until I reach adulthood. It should be enough to improve our family's current situation. It won't be deposited into my account until I turn 18. Little Sheldon raised his head and said, "Do you know the origins of the lottery?" Although embarrassed by his mother's insistence on thanking Peggy, he regained his confidence in the face of his family's incredulous stares. He was the child who could pull his family out of its predicament, the most attractive child in the family. Since both Peggy and Locke held the consulting position, he naturally needed one too, to avoid being left behind. Ahem, as long as Sheldon promises not to perform lottery calculations again, we'll pay him on time every year. This consultant's contract is lifetime, with a proportional annual increase. However, if he violates the agreement and secretly profits from lottery calculations, he'll face substantial compensation. If we hire him to calculate potential lottery loopholes, that's not an exception. And he'll receive additional fees for each assistance, the Lottery Association representative explained with a look of resignation, then glanced at Peggy and Locke. He hadn't expected such a rare crop of geniuses to emerge one day. Fortunately, Sheldon was relatively easy to deal with, and his consulting fees were much cheaper than the other two. He just wanted to get the contract done quickly. And since Sheldon seemed easy to fool, He might be a good choice for future lottery loophole audits, potentially saving some money. From that perspective, Sheldon was probably just a cheap tool. Chapter 133 Escorted. The FBI will escort Gabriel from the NYPD to FBI headquarters tomorrow. If they want to take action, the best option is to do it while they're there. They won't try to force their way into the FBI's New York headquarters, Damon relayed his recent intelligence to Locke. Gabriel's men should have gotten the news, too. I discovered one of his men secretly contacting a police officer. Can you tell me what Gabriel's arrangements are? Locke continued. No. The plans and actions are all being made by the men Gabriel brought from Mexico. The gang in New York is only providing intelligence and logistical support. They don't know how Gabriel's men will act. Armed with this information, Locke pondered for a moment and said, in that case, notify Arthur and have him find a way to strike alone. Meanwhile, gather all the information about the route the escort vehicle will take and give it to me. Locke had no intention of letting Gabriel return to Mexico. It would be exponentially more difficult to deal with a major trafficker like him back home. The Continental Hotel had already accepted the order, and Locke knew they would send a skilled assassin, and Arthur would also look for an opportunity to act. Locke's offer was that if Gabriel died, regardless of how or who killed him, the bill would be paid. However, as a precaution, Locke needed to observe the operation from a distance to ensure Gabriel's fate was secure. 10 Chevrolets, flanked by a transport van, departed from the NYPD. The sheer volume of personnel demonstrated the FBI's commitment to Gabriel. However, barely a block away from the NYPD, the convoy encountered road maintenance, forcing them to reroute. After giving the order to reroute, Harry, the FBI supervisor in charge of the escort, felt a pang of worry. Why hadn't he received advance warning of the road maintenance in the block ahead? After a moment's deliberation, he picked up the intercom and was about to order the convoy to turn around, but just then, a dark figure descended from the sky. Stand alert, Harry quickly commanded, turning back to see the massive electromagnet of the electromagnetic crane. The transport van, holding Gabriel, was now firmly attached to the magnet and lifted by the crane. Damn it, Harry yelled into the intercom. Everyone get out of the car. There's a robber. Everyone prepare to fight. Watch out for the transport van. We have our men inside. Be careful of any injuries. A group of heavily armed FBI agents disembarked, but fearing any casualties, they could only watch helplessly as the transport van was hoisted up a dozen stories into a nearby building. Quick, everyone, seal off the building. Guard all exits. Everyone else, follow me upstairs. Harry quickly barked orders as he led his men toward the building. The FBI had finally taken over Gabriel's case from the NYPD at considerable cost. If anything went wrong with this transport, they would surely be punished. FBI agents hastily positioned themselves at the building's exits, blocking the elevators. The others rushed up the stairwells. But when they reached the upper floors, they found only the empty transport van and the bodies of their colleagues. On one side of the building, there was a rappel leading to another building 50 meters away. At the same time, prisoners in prison uniforms burst out from the surrounding buildings one after another, blending into the crowd. The FBI agents stationed at the basement and on the street were at a loss as to which one to arrest. The prisoners outnumbered their own men. Meanwhile, the real Gabriel had already changed into a suit, climbed into his car, and driven away under the protection of his men. Harry could only curse angrily, feeling helpless in the face of the situation. Ha ha ha! After walking a few blocks, Gabriel couldn't help but burst into laughter before saying, "The route back has been arranged." "Right, everything has been arranged," said the man next to him. "Also, the two troublesome guys at the hospital and their families have been dealt with." "Excellent." A fierce gleam flashed across Gabriel's face, and he asked, "What about the guy who caused my car accident? Did you take him out?" "He's a bit troublesome," the man said. "He's a billionaire from New York. I hear he has deep ties to the Plimpton family here and the Ewing family in Texas." "Billionaire?" Gabriel hesitated. If it were just an ordinary wealthy man, Gabriel wouldn't have hesitated, but the other party was a billionaire. Billionaires usually have deep connections in the United States, and crucially, they had ties to the Ewing family. Part of Mexico borders Texas, and he was well aware of the Ewing family's power. If he accidentally angered them, he would be in for a very bad time. It seems this matter needs to be carefully considered. Continue to gather intelligence on them. Hold off on any rash actions for now. Wait a while, Gabriel thought to himself. If he acted now, he would undoubtedly be suspected. With the Ewing family's connections and relationships, the retaliation would be severe, and he would get into serious trouble. But one can't remain vigilant forever. Sooner or later, he would find an opportunity. Wait until everyone has forgotten about this matter, and then it would be much safer to act. Look out, swish, bang. At that moment, a truck suddenly rushed towards their car. The man driving in front slammed on the brakes and swerved, barely avoiding the truck, but the car suddenly crashed into a roadside building. Damn it. Get out of the car. We can't wait for the police, Gabriel, recovering from the intense impact, quickly ordered. Fuck you. Move. Several of his men escorted Gabriel out of the car and quickly left the scene. Another called for help from another unit. Gabriel signaled as they passed a truck, and someone quickly turned around and approached the driver's seat, gun drawn, ready to kill the driver who had suddenly appeared and caused such trouble. BIU, at that moment, a hole shattered in the driver's window, revealing a bloody wound in the head of the man who had just approached. Arthur, dressed in trucker's clothing, pushed open the door and exited the truck, shooting at Gabriel and several of his men as they sped away. Arthur, known as the mechanic, excelled at disguising assassinations as accidents, but that didn't mean he wouldn't resort to direct attacks. This operation was more complex, leaving him with no room for maneuver, so he had to resort to head-on attack. Be careful. One of Gabriel's men noticed Arthur, pulled out a gun and prepared to fight back, but the next moment, several bloody holes appeared on his body. Another man pulled the trigger at Arthur repeatedly, forcing Arthur to jump and hide in the corner of the wall. The two sides then engaged in a mutual shooting. Let's go. The last man pulled Gabriel and fled quickly. Gabriel didn't know where Arthur came from, but he knew that leaving quickly was the best option at this time. At the same time, pedestrians on the street screamed and dodged when they saw the gunfight, fearing that they would be implicated. The people of New York are experienced in facing shootings, and they understand that in such a melee, who knows if they will be hit by a sudden stray bullet. The best option is to quickly hide behind the surrounding cover. Chapter 134 Trying Something New. Follow them, Locke said to Damon, who was driving, as the car had collided due to gunfire, blocking the road. Not far from them, Arthur and Gabriel's men were engaged in a shootout. It wasn't difficult to deduce Gabriel's escape. The men the FBI had apprehended, scurrying around in prison uniforms, were members of a makeshift gang. They were part of a local gang working with Gabriel, and Locke had long known through intelligence that they were collaborators. These gang members had gathered in that particular neighborhood on short notice. Gabriel's men were cautious, having only requested the men last night and brought them to the buildings without informing them of their intended purpose. However, the unusual movement of these gang members allowed Locke to guess the location. Arriving nearby, he spotted Gabriel's men and used the magical seal to control their movements. The two men exited the car, ignoring the crowds around them, and watched as Arthur dispatched the remaining men before tracking Gabriel. By this time, the two sides had gained some distance. Gabriel pushed aside a black woman who stood in his way and was about to speed up when he suddenly felt a pain in his chest. Looking down, he saw a small dagger lodged in his chest, deeply embedded in it. The dagger twisted after entering, causing a stream of blood to flow out, staining his shirt and suit red. His men, turning to see this, were also startled and rushed to support him. But before they could examine his injuries, Arthur, who had arrived from behind, shot him down with a few shots. Fuck. After knocking out the last of Gabriel's men, Arthur rushed over. Seeing the dagger in Gabriel's heart and the pool of blood, he couldn't help but curse, realizing that his companions had beaten him to the punch. He glanced around, but without stopping, he quickly chose a direction and left the scene. Drive the car back later. I'm leaving now. Using his magical senses, Locke cast a spell from afar, controlling the surrounding wind and further ripping the wound in Gabriel's heart, completely reducing his heart to a pool of shredded flesh. At this point, Locke finally felt relieved to leave, leaving Damon to observe the aftermath. Over an hour later, Locke, returning to the apartment, received a call from Damon. It's confirmed death, and Arthur has said he won't accept any further compensation. This guy doesn't want the money, Locke smiled. It had been agreed beforehand, as long as the person died, he would receive the full compensation regardless of the outcome. Why would Arthur refuse? He apologized because the company assigned him another mission, requiring him to complete it. Damon continued, I asked him for help on a personal basis. He's sorry he can't participate in the subsequent operation, and the payment is his apology, Those who have made a name for themselves in this industry are truly unique. Since he has another mission, let him do it. We also need to confirm the order with the Continental Hotel. It's confirmed. The assassin has also expressed his willingness to participate in the subsequent operation in Mexico, but he doesn't want any money for her next mission. No money. It seems the two assassins we hired this time are not simple. Locke raised an eyebrow. So what does she want? She wants to meet with you to talk. A meeting. Locke pondered for a moment, recalling the female assassin he had seen today who had stabbed Gabriel in the heart. Although she had been made up, he could quickly guess the situation based on some of her facial features and his memories. Don't worry about it now. I'll meet with her before we leave for Mexico. Locke finally provided a time and an address. Mona Ipez's palm prints were left on the glass. Her clothes were disheveled but intact, and Locke couldn't bring himself to remove them. Mona Ipez was undoubtedly a master at keeping a man fresh, always finding a way to keep him looking fresh. This comprehensive set of skills had enabled her to rise from impoverished immigrant to a wealthy wife, the envy of many American girls. After a fight, it was time for a break. Mona, lounging lazily on the bed, suddenly said, "Do you think I could support myself if I divorced and took on part-time modeling, or opened a boutique clothing store? I'm starting to get tired of my current life." Locke frowned, instantly realizing Mona's greed was testing him. Sure enough, a woman like this taking the initiative wasn't just because of her good looks. Mona Ipez had a prenuptial agreement, meaning she'd receive very little in the event of a divorce. The talk of part-time modeling or opening a boutique was just anecdotal evidence. It was likely a ploy to get him to foot the bill. She was essentially no different from those women who, knowing someone was rich, would do anything to get their hands on someone. Knowing she was richer than her husband, she sought to climb the social ladder. Locke had long known this woman's true nature, but men all had their own quirks. Pretending to be confused, Locke asked, "What's up? Did you have a fight with Mr. Ipez?" "No, he's still very nice to me. I just don't think my current life is what I want. Every time I go out with him, meet his friends or family, they treat me like a thief, secretly wary of me. And then there are those bad men like you who only want to take advantage." Her words made Locke wary. This woman was certainly not content. People are truly never satisfied. Perhaps it was the greed of material satisfaction that led to her pursuit of higher material goods, perhaps compounded by the contrast brought on by Locke's superior abilities. Locke could guess what Mona was thinking. He couldn't promise her anything, even as a normal girlfriend, because he understood her true ambitions. It seemed they would gradually distance themselves from each other. Most men don't mind carrying forward the legacy of Wei Wu, simply having fun, but they don't want to have to deal with it. This mentality applies to most people, and he's no exception. "That depends on how you weigh it," Locke said, clearly stating his perfunctory attitude. "You can choose the life you want." A flicker of disappointment flashed in Mona Ipez's eyes. A clever woman, she saw what Locke was saying, but she quickly slipped her hand under the covers. "I haven't thought about it yet." Mona gave a hesitant look, then changed the subject. "Let's talk about it later. Do you think it's less interesting now than it was at the beginning?" "Not bad. For example, your outfit today is great," Locke said with a smile. "Really? Thanks for the compliment," Mona said with a smile. "I was thinking about inviting a friend along, and I'd already called her beforehand. Now it seems that's not necessary." "Friend?" Locke raised an eyebrow. "She's a friend I met in Pilates class. She seems to be a lesbian, so I was wondering if you'd like to try something new." Mona smiled and said, "I've discussed this with her before. She might let me find a man. She's a real beauty." Chapter 135 Appearance Frequency. Fashionable and exquisite clothing wrapped around her slender figure, with short light blonde hair, large round earrings, and deep and charming blue eyes. Fate sometimes seems particularly strange. The new friend Mona met was actually someone Locke knew. He had met her before at a party in New York. Her name was Annie. Her family was in the medical business, and they were major shareholders of several private general hospitals in the eastern United States. She was a beautiful, wealthy woman. After seeing her, Locke couldn't help but complain in his heart that beautiful women nowadays are all working on their own, which is really a waste of resources. Recognizing Locke, Annie was a little embarrassed at first, but Locke calmly told her about their meeting. Upon hearing this, Mona wore a carefree, almost playful smile, and chimed in, "It's even better if you know each other. This should be quite interesting. So, let's get started. Let's go take a shower first." Annie, do you think we should invite him along? The tub is big enough for 3. Annie seemed quite relaxed, otherwise she wouldn't have agreed to Mana's offer. After a brief moment of awkwardness, the corners of her mouth curled up, she took off her coat and tossed it to Locke, giving him a look as she entered the bathroom. Some of these scenes Locke had only witnessed in his previous life, watching Japanese teachers teach them. Now, experiencing them in person, they felt even more exciting than those lessons, giving Locke a deeper appreciation for sandwiches. Over the next few days, the 3 of them made plans to hang out together whenever Mr. Ipez was out. Perhaps it was because they were so busy, that one afternoon, on their way back from school, Mr. Ipez visited. He took the initiative to ask Locke if he knew any qualified private investigators or if his security company had any suitable female bodyguards. He suspected his wife of infidelity. Mr. Ipez said he had returned home twice in recent days and hadn't seen Mana Ipez. She seemed absent-minded when he returned, which made him wary. Mr. Ipez, unaware that Locke would take days off when he needed, assumed Locke was always at school and didn't suspect him. Locke remained calm, saying that Mr. Ipez's suspicions were valid, but that he shouldn't be overly paranoid. He then recommended several female bodyguards for him to choose from, saying they could protect Mana Ipez. After reassuring Mr. Ipez, Locke called Mana and told her to be more restrained and careful in future meetings. He also said he could instruct his company's bodyguards if necessary, but there was no guarantee they wouldn't secretly take photos and leak them. Mana seemed unconcerned, saying she had a plan and had consulted a divorce lawyer so she could have enough money to live on even in the worst-case scenario. If Mr. Ipez hired bodyguards, Locke didn't need to instruct him much, just that they should fulfill their duties. She wouldn't be able to see Locke for a while. Locke didn't care. Final exams were coming up, and Damon's recruitment was almost complete. They were already gathering in Mexico. Once the exams were over, Locke would leave immediately. Locke didn't want to let Mana delay his potential point earning. That morning, after final exams, Locke arranged for the bodyguards to provide tighter protection for the others while he himself arrived at the Central Park Apartments in New York. Locke hadn't been here since Gabriel's rear-end collision. That was until Gabriel's gang was completely wiped out. The New York gang that had been working with Gabriel was also wiped out by Damon, who had returned to his old ways, and the female assassins from the Continental Hotel. Locke was planning to visit before leaving for Mexico. As he opened the apartment door, he saw Rachel frantically searching for something. "Locke, have you seen my engagement ring?" Rachel asked, running towards him. Since running away from her marriage, Rachel has found a successful job at a fashion company, occasionally enjoying some solace with Locke. Life has been so enjoyable lately that Rachel hasn't thought about her fiancé for a long time. It wasn't until she happened to see her ex-best friend in a cafe a few days ago that she finally remembered him. She was about to return the engagement ring she'd taken with her when she ran away from her marriage, but suddenly realized she couldn't find it. "Even if you want to act so arrogant, you don't have to stand so far away," Locke teased. "Oh my God, can you please stop joking?" Rachel glared at Locke, a little annoyed. "Please ask for me. Did it fall into that hotel room you booked at the beginning of the month?" "Don't worry, it's impossible." Locke thought for a moment and said without hesitation, "I remember you still had it when I dropped you off that time, but I was about to return the diamond ring, and now it's gone." Rachel panicked. "How should I tell Barry? Even if it's lost, it's no big deal," Locke said nonchalantly. "Why do you think Barry hasn't tried to contact you through your family in all this time? Did he do something that your father couldn't stand?" "What?" Rachel was stunned. "What do you think he would say to you when he suddenly disappeared at the wedding? Did you stop loving him and stand him up on that day? Or did you go crazy or even develop some unexplainable disease and run away?" "Definitely crazy and ran away." Joey and Chandler made a choice a man would make without hesitation. "Impossible." Rachel shook her head. "He wouldn't do that. He loves me so much," but her voice trailed off, knowing the most likely scenario was just as Joey and Chandler had said. "Locke," Monica quickly stopped him. "Not every man is like you. Rachel knows me. I wouldn't get engaged, let alone married." Locke shrugged, earning a furious glare from Rachel. "Let's hurry up and find the ring," Monica said, grabbing Rachel. "Barry isn't that kind of guy." Right, Rachel consoled herself, convincing herself as she gathered everyone else to help search. It wasn't until a casual reminder that they found the diamond ring hidden among Monica's freshly baked lasagna that Rachel suddenly remembered. Locke was quite familiar with the ring. After all, he'd always loved seeing Rachel wearing it in drag. It always brought her so much joy. Now, thinking about Rachel returning it, he felt a little sorry. It felt like drag would be less fun in the future. "Locke, can you give me a ride?" After finding the ring, Rachel put her arm around Locke's neck and said coquettishly, "I'll take you to the door, but I won't get out of the car." "I'll only wait for you for 5 minutes," Locke said. "No problem, wait a minute." With that, she went to dress up. Meeting an ex is a matter of decorum. If you still have feelings for her, dress simply and appear haggard, letting them know you're heartbroken. This suggests that if they still have feelings for you, they should come over and show some affection, a little attention. Whether they agree or not is another matter. If you're determined to break up completely, then of course you should dress as beautifully as possible, ideally looking radiant and showing that you're doing well. Naturally, Rachel felt a bit guilty about running away from her marriage. But Locke had been playing games with her for a while, even devising plots and scripts that featured brides and weddings quite frequently. Locke couldn't help himself. In her early 20s, Rachel was truly youthful and beautiful. In a previous life, she'd been named the world's most beautiful woman by People magazine. In short, after spending a long time with Locke, Rachel's original guilt, which was not much, had long since disappeared. At this time, she naturally dressed up as beautifully as possible and asked Locke to drive her, which was also a hint that she was being pursued by someone more powerful. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136 Meeting. While Rachel was getting her makeup done, Chandler began recounting his wonderful dating experiences. "She's like no other woman I've ever met. Her life is so colorful." As Chandler spoke, everyone else's perspective on life was shaken. Aurora loved to travel the world, openly having a husband and more than one boyfriend. She also had a unique skill. Last night, on their date, she'd counted the coins in Chandler's pocket with her feet under the table. She even described their relationship as that of Italian comrades, since she was Italian. Upon hearing this, everyone turned to Joey, and Phoebe exclaimed, "I always thought Parisians were the most romantic, but I didn't expect Italians to have so much fun." Joey nodded proudly, seemingly quite pleased. In his previous life, Locke, a native of Eastern Europe, had always watched American TV shows and thought Americans had fun. But in the eyes of Americans, Europe was the place for fun, especially France, known for its romance, and now Italy as well. Finally, Chandler said he'd go on another date with Aurora in a couple of days. "What? You dare date a woman like that?" Monica was speechless. "I was hesitant at first, too," Chandler said. "But then it hit me. I'm not at a disadvantage at all. I can freely enjoy romance without any responsibility. It's literally every man's dream." "Yeah," Joey agreed, nodding and giving a thumbs up. "No," Phoebe said incredulously. "Do all you men think that way?" "Of course I do. Look at Locke." Chandler gestured at Locke. "He's the one who dates girls and doesn't take responsibility. Don't you mind if the girl you're dating is also dating someone else?" Monica couldn't help but ask. "I can't do that," Joey shook his head. "When I date a woman, I have to have more dates than she has." Monica then looked at Locke. "I can't stand it either," Locke shrugged. "I usually make things clear up front. If I need to break up, I'll tell you in advance. If a woman sees someone else while I'm dating her, I'll be furious." "Oh, men," Monica and Phoebe scoffed at Locke's double standards. Locke didn't explain. Even if he were choosing a comrade, he wouldn't choose a woman like that, let alone a committed relationship. When he met the female doctor who knew the future, Locke observed her for a while, confirming she wasn't as skilled as she was portrayed in the plot, before accepting her offer. Monica and Phoebe then joined together in their disdain for Locke's approach to love, only to be relieved when Rachel emerged, putting on her makeup. It was 11 p.m. on a New York City rooftop. Locke stood quietly on the edge, taking in the New York nightscape. Suddenly, sensing movement behind him, he flashed, a gun appearing in his hand, pointed at the head of a newly arrived black woman. Very sharp moves, Locke flashed his hand, sheathing his gun. "You're the assassin from the Continental Hotel who wanted to see me. What's your name, Catilia?" the woman said after a moment's silence, confirming Locke's previous suspicions. Would you mind taking on a major trafficker besides the Cordes family? Catalia asked. Do you have a grudge against a major trafficker? Though it was a question, Locke was certain she was the female assassin in the deadly Black Orchid. Her father had once worked for a Colombian major trafficker, but was silenced because he wanted to retire. Later, thanks to the evidence Catalia had taken with her during her escape, the major trafficker was taken into hiding by the CIA, continuing his criminal activities and providing intelligence and funds to the CIA. Seeing no response, Locke continued, do you know where your enemy is now? It's been a year since my debut, and I haven't found any leads. So I need you to help me find him, Catalia said. I know you're very powerful. Doesn't the Continental Hotel have the information you're looking for? Locke asked. They said my offer wasn't enough. Catalia shook her head. Then tell me your price first, Locke said. For 10 years, I can help you take down any gang, trafficker, or enemy, Catalia said. No wonder, Locke understood. Her enemy, Louis Tang, was now working for the CIA. Catalia's offer wasn't worth much to the Continental Hotel, and it wasn't worth antagonizing the CIA. I can agree to it, but it requires a blood contract. If you break it, the Continental Hotel will certainly take action against you, Locke said. I'll transfer the deposit to you for dealing with the Cordes family later. Now, tell me if you have any information about your enemies, and I'll investigate. Catalia nodded happily and quickly shared all the information she knew. Turning and leaving the rooftop, Locke felt very satisfied. Sometimes, he didn't have to be like many wealthy people. When recruiting people for special tasks, he needed to use many methods and repeatedly test them before deciding whether a person was trustworthy. Whether it was Damon, Mindy, Vanessa, or even the assassin before him, he could predict their intentions and general personalities. Then, during their interactions and collaborations, he could employ targeted strategies to cultivate relationships and gain a deeper understanding of their circumstances. Even those who were solely focused on money could be leveraged effectively and become his own. Due to the need for secrecy, Locke couldn't travel to Mexico openly through official channels. Instead, he would return to Texas and then quietly cross the border to his destination. He was traveling with Damon, and Vanessa, like everyone else, had already arrived in Mexico. Vanessa had previously mapped the Cordes family's power structure and nearly identified their key subordinates. The whereabouts of Martin and Victor had also been confirmed. The only person still missing was Gabriel's uncle, Carlos. He had semi-retired several years ago and rarely appeared in public. He was known only to be in central Mexico. On the way, Locke reviewed information on his cousins, Martin and Victor, while pondering his fate. If they killed the two of them first, Carlos Cordes would probably hide more secretly, requiring Locke to spend more time investigating. So it was best to find this guy first and kill him, and then deal with Martin and Victor as soon as possible. Chapter 137 Finding Someone. Upon arriving in Mexico, Locke used magic to change his face and adjust his form before meeting with the 24 newly recruited Navy SEALs and Green Berets. The deposit has already been paid to you, along with a resettlement allowance specifically for this operation. In the event of injury or death, you and your families will receive generous compensation and pensions. Locke addressed their concerns. Furthermore, if the operation yields any other results, you will also receive corresponding bonuses, enough to earn more than you could earn in 10 years. These words were quickly met with cheers. These men were the elite of the military, having left the military to take on these hard-working jobs solely for the money, and Locke's words resonated perfectly with them. After the meeting, Vanessa told Locke, "My people have found a lead on Carlos Cordes. Take me to her," Locke said without hesitation. Locke and Vanessa drove down the highway. "She's right there." Vanessa's eyes suddenly fixed on an ordinary sedan. She stepped on the accelerator and chased after it, paralleling it. "How is it going, girl?" Vanessa said, smiling. "Not bad," she replied, and Locke was surprised to discover the woman greeting Vanessa was actually Wonder Woman. "I didn't expect your new boss to be so handsome." As Locke and Vanessa parked their car and stepped out, Wonder Woman was already standing by the car, greeting Vanessa, her long, tall legs clearly visible in her denim shorts. "Giselle, my friend," Vanessa introduced herself to Locke. "Nice to meet you." Locke shook her hand and glanced at Vanessa. The name was identical to Vanessa's original self, giving him a strange sense of déjà vu. Locke guessed that this Giselle was most likely the female racer from The Fast and the Furious, and wondered how they'd met. "She was born in Brazil like me," Vanessa said. "She is my best sister." "Really?" Brazil is really a place of outstanding people and beautiful women, and it can produce beauties like you too. Locke nodded calmly, glanced at her long legs, and then said, but as far as I know, she has been working for a South American trafficker named Braga. This is a big trouble. Then it's too late for you to worry. I have worked for Braga before. Vanessa smiled and said, she came here to help me this time. Braga won't know you exist. Of course I believe you won't tell on her. Locke shrugged his shoulders. I just want to confirm if there will be any problems with her. Then how are you going to confirm? Giselle slowly walked in front of Locke, staring into Locke's eyes and asked. Don't worry. I'll confirm it later during the operation. Locke stared at Giselle for a moment, then smiled and said, now tell me where Carlos Cortés is. I don't know where Carlos Cortés is, Giselle said slowly, but I know someone who definitely knows his whereabouts. Locke casually observed Giselle's movements and expressions. His psychology was not in vain, and combined with his understanding of Giselle's character, he could draw a reliable conclusion for the next operation. He's Carlos's confidant. I know where he is, Giselle said. Very good, then take my men to find him. Locke gestured to Vanessa, turned back to the car, and drove away alone. He doesn't look like your type, Giselle said after Locke left. This kind of upper-class elite with a milky smell, maybe not in the past. Vanessa glanced at Giselle and got in the car. But since we want a more stable life, we naturally have to make different choices. Vanessa and Giselle had both joined gangs before. But they weren't the kind of sluts who completely detached themselves from the mainstream, living in the underworld and squandering their youth. While they could have relied on their looks and figures to make a living, they ultimately chose to rely on their skills, which prevented them from becoming easily bullied. Both of them had developed exceptional driving skills, making them uniquely qualified for important missions. However, Vanessa initially opted for stability, signing with a modeling agency. After taking a risk and earning a fortune, she gradually separated herself from the gang and drifted further away. Giselle, on the other hand, preferred a life on the edge, rising in rank within the gang. Now, escaping was no longer easy. The next morning, the three vehicles arrived at a series of factory-like repair shops along the highway several kilometers outside the city. It was then that the team members learned of their target. After everyone was in place, Locke, sitting in the command vehicle a kilometer away, said to Damon, "You take command?" Locke had no experience commanding a raid like this. He was hardly a rookie, and he wouldn't take these men's lives lightly. Without further ado, Damon nodded and connected to the command channel. Using the information from the surveillance footage, he issued orders to the 8-man team, instructing the snipers to locate suitable sniping positions. While tactical individual communication technology wasn't as mature and complete as it would be in the future, it was already practical for combat. About half an hour later, Locke, standing outside the vehicle and observing through military binoculars, quickly detected movement. Faced with a sudden onslaught of elite troops, the dozen or so dealers inside the repair shop were virtually defenseless. The mission was accomplished in just 3 minutes. 6 were killed and 5 captured, including what Giselle had described as Carlos Cortés's trusted men, with no casualties. The car pulled up to the repair shop's gate. Locke, a smile on his face, got out. As he entered, a frown crept over him. The faint stench of corpses mingled with the stench of blood, drawing his gaze towards the nearby walls. When one wall was smashed open, he saw 5 mummified bodies wrapped in layers of plastic and tape. Several people nearby retched. Locke paused, surveying the various walls of the repair shop, which were noticeably thicker than usual, and sighed. These people use this as a way to show off. The more enemies you kill, the more bodies you hide in your room, and the higher your status. Meanwhile, Giselle explained. She also worked with the traffickers, so she'd heard of and even seen them before. Of all the people, she remained the calmest. The others, even Vanessa, expressed disgust. With a light sigh, Locke said to Damon and Giselle, "You two go and pry open their mouths. I want to know where Lucas is. After we get the answer, send these people back to their families." Understood. Damon nodded with a dangerous smile on his face. Chapter 138 Infiltration. After Damon and Giselle left, Locke led Kataria outside and asked, "Your enemy, Louis Tang, has a subordinate named Mark." His right palm was stabbed through with a knife. "Yes," Kataria said, delighted. "That Mark was the one who led the team that harmed my parents and forced my father to hand over the evidence. I stabbed him in the palm of his hand because he was careless." That's right, Locke hadn't actually followed any clues, Relying solely on the movie footage he remembered to gather the necessary information. I can confirm that Louis Tang has been hiding in the United States for years, but it will take some time to find his exact location. Katarina was a little disappointed, but then she realized that Locke had only been in Mexico for a few days and had already found some leads on Louis Tang and Mark. It was clear that his connections and relationships were quite powerful. With this thought, Katarina made up her mind to take this mission seriously and ensure Locke's safety. She couldn't let him be in any danger before she got her revenge. In reality, Locke had already established sufficient intelligence based on the information he knew. The CIA had obtained evidence from Catalia but hadn't immediately turned it over. He used the CIA's cover to force Louis Don to leave Colombia and continue his business in the United States, providing him with intelligence. Thanks to this intelligence and his cunning, this unassuming CIA agent in Colombia has now risen to the rank of senior manager. With these clues, along with the location and layout of the villa previously mentioned in the plot, Locke should be able to locate it in a few days. The reason he held back on this was to maintain his control. He was gradually cultivating the favor of this Avenger, a figure who had been obsessed with revenge since the age of 9, learning all sorts of knowledge and practicing the art of killing. He needed to establish a trusting relationship with Catalia, otherwise, even with a blood pact at the Continental Hotel, he could face unexpected situations. Locke also needed a subordinate who could do his dirty work behind the scenes, someone with both intelligence and skill. Neither Damon nor Vanessa were as suitable for this kind of work as Catalia. An hour or so later, Damon calmly approached Locke and relayed the news he had received. It turned out that, in the past few days, the Cortez family had been in turmoil due to Gabriel's death. Originally, the two brothers, Gabriel and Martin Cortez, had taken control of the family after their father's death. Martin, the elder brother, led sales and related businesses in Ciudad Juarez, northern Mexico, along with his cousin, while his younger brother maintained and expanded the plantation business in central Mexico. As for Carlos Cortez, the two brothers had collectively marginalized him, forcing him to retreat into seclusion and a semi-retired life. After the news of Gabriel's death reached him a few days ago, Carlos Cortez suddenly surged forward, quickly gaining the support of his subordinates and taking over the business in central Mexico. Under these circumstances, Martin Cortez had to accept the constraints of Carlos Cortez's supply and accept this reality. Otherwise, unless he could win over most of the subordinates in central Mexico, any attempt to seize territory would risk internal strife and the threat of attacks from other rivals. Locke and his companions were still some distance from Carlos's hideout. They split into smaller groups and quietly drove towards Mexico's Sierra Madre National Park, where Carlos resided. Observing the estate from a distance, they found it fairly well guarded, though two patrols were soon spotted. It was impossible to determine how many people were inside the estate, or Carlos Cortez's exact location. A rash attack might alert the enemy. A skilled individual like Carlos Cortez would have left a designated escape route in his residence, ready to flee if he sensed anything was amiss. This distance is enough. If we advance any further, the chance of being discovered will increase rapidly. We'll have to resort to frontal assault, Damon observed for a moment and said, everyone has reviewed the manor's architectural plans. The 8 members of the small team that came with us are already in place, but I need someone to infiltrate and monitor Carlos's situation, and find the right time to launch a surprise attack. Katarina then said, leave it to me. I'm good at infiltration, and since I'm a woman, I can effectively lower the guards' vigilance. I can do that, too. I'm best at dealing with men, Giselle said beside her. The two exchanged glances. Then I'll leave it to you, Locke gestured to Katarina. He remembered her as a master of stealth and sneak attacks in the movies, skilled at elusive elimination. Katarina nodded with permission, changed into her gear, and, taking advantage of the darkness, drove the car to a bush 100 meters from the manor. Armed with her weapons, Katarina used her night vision goggles and quietly approached the manor's gate. Reaching the edge of a flower bed about 10 meters outside the gate, Katarina lowered her head and gun to the ground. Waiting for the 3 guards at the gate to turn around, she quickly raised her gun. Biu biu biu, 3 silenced gunshots echoed, and the 3 guards at the gate instantly fell to the ground, shot on the head. After successfully dispatching the guards, Katarina hid behind the gatepost and peered into the manor for a few seconds. After confirming that no one else was around, she took her time to rush in. She connected the voicemail and announced, the manor gate has been cleared. We're about to enter, understood. We'll begin the assault in 30 seconds. If we're spotted, We'll switch to a forced assault to attract more guards' attention, Damon replied immediately. Cordelia then infiltrated the manor first. The manor's large area and numerous buildings offer many advantages, but they also present a greater challenge for the guards. Carlos had over 30 bodyguards at the manor, with over a dozen deployed to patrol the gate and surrounding areas. The rest of the group was scattered throughout the complex, spanning over 1,500 square meters. This greatly facilitated Cordelia's sneak attack. After dispatching 4 bodyguards along the way, Cordelia spotted her target, Carlos Cortez, sitting at a table with his wife, enjoying dinner on a terrace. Sitting with them were 2 young men, presumably Carlos's sons. They were flanked by an obviously trusted henchman and 4 bodyguards. Chapter 139 Don't Care. Bang, 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 boom. At that moment, gunfire and explosions rang out from outside the manor. The members of the raid had attracted the guards' attention. Following Damon's orders, they switched to infiltration and assault, and a fierce exchange of fire ensued. The Carlos family, who were dining, heard the commotion and immediately became alert. Carlos waved his hand and gave a few words to a close confidant who had approached. The confidant left with 2 bodyguards. The exchange of fire was brief. After just over a minute, the intense gunfire died down, leaving only sporadic gunfire. By then, Cordelia had reached the terrace. Bang, bang, with 2 consecutive shots, she eliminated the 2 bodyguards next to the Carlos family. She then approached the family, gun drawn. Seeing the bodyguards fall and Cordelia approaching with her gun drawn, the 2 young men dropped their knives and forks on the table in fear. Carlos, seated at the head table, remained calm. He shook his wife's hand and said to his 2 sons, "Sit still, or you'll be the ones killed." Carlos Cortez, Cordelia looked at him, confirming his identity. "Whatever your employer gives you, I'll give you 10 times as much," Carlos said. "No, I have $10 million in the safe in my room, all in cash, along with a stash of gold and jewelry. If you let us go, it's all yours." Cordelia paid no attention to Carlos's words. Her parents had been killed by traffickers, and she had studied them since she was a child, knowing the promises were worthless. Furthermore, to fulfill her long-cherished wish for revenge, she needed the information her new boss could provide. Seeing Cordelia unmoved, her calm gaze sweeping over herself and her family, Carlos stood up and said, $20 million. I can call the bank right now and transfer it to the account you specify." Bang! Carlos had barely finished speaking when a bullet pierced his shoulder. Carlos' wife screamed in terror, but his 2 sons, though terrified, remained relatively calm. Footsteps sounded, and Carlos turned to see Locke approaching with Damon, Vanessa, and Giselle. While they were talking, the other team members had nearly eliminated the guards and began searching the manor for any remaining remains. "You watch from the sidelines while the operatives clear the manor," Locke gestured to Damon to prevent anyone from eavesdropping, then approached Carlos. "Boss," Cordelia called, letting Carlos know that Locke was the one in charge. "While many people prefer to let their enemies know before they die, I think it's best to wait until they're dead." With that, Locke drew the pistol from his waistband. Carlos knew he was doomed, but he still made a final stand. "Don't do it in front of my family, of course," Locke said, swiveling the gun. Bang, 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 3 gunshots rang out, but Carlos felt no pain. But before he could rejoice, he turned and saw the scene beside him, tears welling in his eyes. Seeing Carlos's heartbroken expression, Locke remained unmoved. He wasn't one of those movie types who would spare the family of an enemy out of a moment's pity. Moreover, he had been determined from the beginning to annihilate the entire Carlos family. If he didn't kill the families of these tycoons, how could he truly eradicate them? He knew how many families had been destroyed by this tycoon, and Locke felt no guilt. "Okay, I've granted you your wish. Now it's your turn," Locke said, pointing the gun at Carlos. "All the money our family has earned over the past few years is hidden in a riverside country villa 60 kilometers southwest of this estate." At that moment, Carlos suddenly uttered these words. "Good try." Locke raised an eyebrow and pulled the trigger. Bang! A bloody hole appeared on Carlos's head. Locke sheathed his gun and said, "Hurry up, our searchers. We have a lot to do next, boss." Cordelia glanced at Locke, wanting to say something but stopping herself. "The truth of this news is still uncertain," Locke expressed indifference. "If any of you are interested, you can go check it out after we take down the Carlos family." The Carlos family has existed for so many years, and they've accumulated tens of millions, maybe even $100 million, in cash that's difficult to launder. You really don't care at all? Vanessa asked. It would take too much effort to get that cash back to the US and launder it. I'd have made a lot more money with that time, Locke shrugged. I don't care what you think. The most important thing now is to get rid of the last two members of the Cordes family. Seeing Locke's attitude, Catalia's heart relaxed, and she looked back at Vanessa and Giselle. It seems I made a mistake not to put my money into Skyfund and leave it to you to manage. Vanessa glanced at Locke with a half-smile. Do I still have a chance now? Anytime, Locke said as he turned to leave. But the source of the money going into Skyfund must be traceable. Watching Locke leave, Vanessa pulled Giselle closer, motioning her to follow him. Locke was confident that the others who had just heard Carlos' words wouldn't be tempted. The only person he wasn't completely sure of was Giselle. Damon had plenty of money. After defeating Damek, he received a large sum, and he later gave a portion of it to Locke. Vanessa also had money on hand, and crucially, she now had some understanding of Locke's earning power. Her previous words were a test, trying to get Locke to take her out. With Locke's agreement, her future financial prospects were clear. Catalia still needed information from Locke, but for her, as long as she could avenge her parents, nothing else mattered. Only Giselle was still unknown to Locke, and he worried she might act irrationally, so he kept a close eye on her every move. Vanessa, who knew Giselle better, whispered a few words into her ear, and then the others continued their search of the estate as if nothing had happened. Locke led a group directly to Carlos's room and found a safe. Upon opening it, they found over $5 million in cash, along with some diamonds and jewelry. Clearly, Carlos's earlier promise to tempt Catalia of $10 million in cash was a lie. Put away the diamonds and jewelry, and pack up the cash as well, and distribute them after the operation is over, Locke said. Send the troops back. Now's the time to deal with Martin and Victor. Martin and Victor, the cousins, lived in a hilltop estate outside Juarez. Locke assigned one team of 8 to deal with Carlos, while the remaining 2 teams remained on standby near the estate, observing from a distance and reporting any signs of trouble. It was almost dawn when Locke and his men returned to Ciudad Juarez. He arranged for everyone except the surveillance personnel to rest at the prepared stronghold. After a day of rest and recuperation, Locke gathered the leading men and carefully discussed the tactics. Ready to begin the operation at night. Chapter 140 I realized before I died that I had provoked someone I shouldn't have provoked. All teams, wait at designated locations. Upon receiving the order, immediately conduct an infiltration raid along the planned route. Observation and sniper teams should monitor any movements. Damon issued the order, which was promptly followed. The observation and sniper teams began reporting back on the movements within the estate. For this attack, Damon redistributed his forces. Vanessa led 3, and Catalia led 4, each keeping a close eye on the movements within the city. This was primarily to prevent police connected to the Cordes family from learning of the situation and arriving with a team after the attack began, thereby delaying reinforcements. This would give them ample time to eliminate Martin and Victor before retreating. Excluding the 3 observers and 2 snipers, 12 personnel would be responsible for the direct assault, attacking from 2 different directions. Damon and his men had arrived in Mexico several days in advance, so they weren't just waiting around. They had already thoroughly mastered the surrounding terrain, the architectural plan of the hilltop estate, and the security patterns. Set out now, decoy, Damon ordered. Giselle shrugged, walked to a nearby car, and opened the door. She heard Locke say, "You probably won't tell your boss about me, will you?" "I'm just doing Vanessa a favor," Giselle said calmly. "Braga won't know what I'm doing, even your real boss." Locke emphasized the word real. Giselle remained silent, staring at Locke for a long moment before saying, "This is a private job, I trust you." Locke smiled. "No federal law enforcement agency is trustworthy. If I were you, I'd quit early. I'm a partner with them, not a pawn to be manipulated," Giselle said, getting in the driver's seat and closing the door. "Maybe that's what you think. When they come knocking on your door, they'll give you an offer you can't refuse," Locke thought to himself. Based on the Fast and Furious stories he'd seen, Giselle wasn't a formal CIA agent, more like a partner, like Dominic. When they needed their help, they'd find a reason, perhaps even offer a deal like clearing their criminal records, to get them to work hard and complete the mission. If problems arose, they could easily shift the blame, since they weren't official agents but rather notorious criminals. By using them as scapegoats, they could avoid any responsibility. This was standard practice in the Federation. For its many secret agencies, the Dominic drag racing gang was a perfect tool. Giselle drove along the road, heading directly towards the top of the hill, rapidly approaching the estate. Such a conspicuous move was quickly spotted by the estate's patrols. Within moments, the spotters saw a large group of gunmen, armed with various weapons, burst out from the various houses within the estate. Giselle drove quickly toward a checkpoint 100 meters outside the estate. The guards, upon seeing the approaching car, opened fire without hesitation. Dang dang dang, bullets pelted the road beside the car, occasionally landing on the car, leaving dents in the bulletproof steel. Rushing past the outpost, a sucked-up iron pineapple flew through the crack in the window, quickly transforming the outpost into a giant fireball. They've all rushed out, gathering near the manor gate, the observer reported over the airwaves. Excellent, Damon released the safety on his gun and ordered, all teams, attack. Anyone with a weapon is an enemy. Sniper team, eliminate the informant rats, cut off the message flow, and cover us. Everyone, move. Under Damon's orders, the operatives split into two groups. One entered the manor directly through the tunnel, while the other reached the base of the outer wall. Damon's team moved throughout the manor, firing silenced rounds at any enemy they encountered. The two snipers also took action, specifically targeting any gunmen carrying walkie-talkies. Anyone spotted became a target. After reducing the outpost to ash, Giselle slammed on the brakes, sideways, and parked the car several dozen meters outside the manor gate. Bang, 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 gunmen from inside the manor opened fire at the gate. Meanwhile, Giselle had already opened the other car door and nimbly dodged into the nearby woods. The manor gates flew open, and a large number of gunmen rushed out, rapidly approaching the woods, firing at any suspicious targets. Da-da-da, just then, gunfire rang out from behind them, and a large number of gunmen fell. The team that had come from the manor's outer wall successfully killed a large number of gunmen from behind, then set its sights on the guards at the gate. 4 gunmen armed with walkie-talkies were quickly dispatched by 2 snipers, who quickly set their sights on those hiding behind cover. The two teams faced an enemy force where even the slightest exposure would result in sniper fire. Of the hundreds of gunmen in the manor, a third had vanished in a matter of moments. Cousins Martin and Victor Cordes had received news of their uncle's attack that morning, but they had yet to determine the culprit. Despite their vigilance, they heightened security within the manor, doubling the number of gunmen inside. By then, there were over 20 men surrounding the two brothers. After the unusual sighting was reported at the gate, the two brothers on the hilltop platform received the news. Martin and Victor both rose from their seats and ordered their men to prepare for a counterattack. But in the blink of an eye, a large number of the manor's guards were killed, and the incoming reports dwindled. This was not a good omen. Damn it. I think it must be American. My brother got into trouble in New York, and then it was that old bastard Carlos. All of this stemmed from America, Martin Cordes said. If I could find out who did it, I would, definitely what? A sudden voice startled everyone. Da, da, da. The next moment, with a sudden burst of gunfire, the hilltop platform was instantly filled with a bloody mist. Screams and the sound of bullets piercing bodies echoed throughout the platform. One by one, the gunmen fell to the ground, over 20 of them falling in the space of just 2 or 3 seconds. At this moment, Locke revealed himself and looked at Martin and Victor. No need to bother looking for me, I'm here. Locke stood before them, sheathing his 2 modified, increased capacity low locks. I had no intention of causing trouble, but it's you traffickers who are so ruthless. My 2 bodyguards and their families were killed, and I knew you would definitely attack me. Bang! Locke suddenly swung his hand, and a gunman lurking in the window of the adjacent room was shot in the head and fell to the ground. Watching the horrific scene around them, Martin and Victor looked at Locke, wearing a tactical mask, filled with fear. As big dealers, they had seen their fair share of gunfights, but the man before them, who had dispatched a whole group of gunmen in the blink of an eye, was beyond their imagination. Why would such a tough guy need bodyguards? They both quickly speculated about Locke's identity, and Martin quickly thought of the man Gabriel had mentioned, and everything clicked in an instant. Wait a minute, this is just a misunderstanding, Locke. Bang, we all know whether this is a misunderstanding or not. You only realized it before you died that you messed with the wrong people, Locke said slowly, looking at Martin and Victor, each with a bloody hole in their head. Thump, thump, thump. The gunfire gradually faded, and the sound of rapid, dense footsteps reached the platform. Damon and Giselle arrived, looking at the blood and bodies on the ground, silent. Giselle noticed that the gunmen hadn't even had time to draw their guns before they were all killed. Then she looked at Martin and Victor, whose eyes were still open, and she was suddenly filled with fear for Locke. No wonder Vanessa chose him. With such strength, it's hard to imagine he was a billionaire. Chapter 141 Distribution. Time's running out. Have everyone search the estate quickly. In 10 minutes, regardless of their gains, the retreating vehicles will leave, Locke said gravely. If you exceed the time limit, you'll have to find your own way back to the States. These Mexican traffickers have no shortage of cash, and this is Martin and Victor's base. A slow search would not be surprising if they found $20 or $30 million in cash at the estate. But Locke didn't have the time for a slow search. Similarly, if these people lost time due to greed, Locke would make them pay. Fortunately, the men Damon had carefully selected were relatively disciplined. 10 minutes later, 6 vehicles stopped near the estate's gates. Watching others dump black backpacks into their trunks, Locke checked the time and told everyone to leave. Boom! A violent explosion erupted more than 100 meters from the estate, engulfing the entire estate in flames, signaling the complete demise of the Cordes family. Elsewhere, Cadaria and Vanessa also received the order to retreat. Seeing the road blocked by the bomb and the dozen or so police cars stuck in the way, they calmly left the scene. A few hours later, everyone gathered at a base outside Ciudad Juarez. It was already 6 a.m. Boxes containing over $10 million in cash were neatly stacked on a long table, along with a stash of gold and jewelry. This made many present breathe heavily. Besides Locke, Damon, Vanessa, Giselle, and Catalia, there were 24 other personnel involved in the operation, 5 of whom were wounded and 2 dead. Locke glanced at the 28 people present and said, "This is $16 million, along with $3,600,000 worth of gold and jewelry. These gold and jewelry belong to me. The rest of the cash is your bonuses and additional compensation for casualties." Everyone glanced at each other and nodded, unanimous. Honestly, this ratio was quite low, and gold and jewelry were not easy for individuals to part with. Normally, beyond the agreed-upon compensation, the money these hard-working soldiers would receive would be a tiny fraction of their earnings, or even nothing at all. "Very good," Locke nodded, taking 3 boxes and handing them to Giselle. "You haven't been paid before. This $3 million is your reward for participating in the operation and providing intelligence leads, plus bonuses." Giselle nodded, took the boxes, and placed them at her feet. Locke then looked at the remaining money and said to the others, "Divide the rest among yourselves, this is yours." Damon clapped his hands, took out 2 boxes, and pushed them to Vanessa and Cadaria. He then took out 2 more boxes. "These will go to the families of the deceased. I'll take the remaining $1 million, and the rest will be divided equally." No one objected. According to Damon's distribution, each person would receive over $300,000, many times more than the federal government would pay them upon their retirement. At current wages, this was what a white-collar worker in a big city would earn in at least 6 to 8 years. And this was just the bonus. Everyone participating in this operation would receive $100,000. So, in reality, Locke made virtually no money from this operation, and even lost some. Fortunately, he did receive the crucial potential points from the mission reward. But besides completing the mission, there was another crucial goal. After everyone received their allocated funds, Locke clapped his hands. "After we return to the States, if you want to continue working on this, you can talk to Damon and Cadaria, and they'll make the arrangements. If you don't want to, just take the money, keep this to yourself, and live a normal life. If any news gets out, Damon will find you." "Understood, understood," everyone agreed simultaneously. Locke nodded. The purpose of recruiting so many people this time was essentially to screen personnel and assign them to Damon and Cadaria to form a special operations team outside of the security company. Once back in the States, Locke wouldn't make things difficult for those who wanted to leave. With the exception of Damon and the others, these people didn't know their true identities or faces. Whenever they met, Locke used magic to influence their senses, so there was no worry of leaks. After dividing the money and arranging the time en route back to the United States, Locke called Damon and Cadaria. "For those who want to leave, just make sure they keep it a secret. As for those who want to join, we'll conduct some more tests. You two will have different responsibilities, so each of you should select the right people, okay? Damon and Cordelia nodded in unison. Locke then called Vanessa in and asked, "What are your plans for that matter Carlos mentioned?" Cordelia's eyes lit up. It seemed Locke had some ideas. Vanessa said, "There's no way around Giselle on this. Are you sure you want to bring her along? She already knows the news, doesn't she? It's best not to get around her." Locke looked at Vanessa, and seeing her determined expression, he nodded. "Call her over. I won't be involved in this. You can discuss the specific actions among yourselves. I won't interfere, and you don't need to report anything to me." After Giselle arrived, Locke said, "If you succeed, you can decide how the money is distributed, and you don't have to include me. If the news is true and you get the money, I can introduce you to an overseas investment company. They know how to launder money, and the annual returns are stable. It's much more cost-effective than just leaving your money in the bank and waiting for it to depreciate." The few people exchanged glances, finally understanding Locke's intentions. Locke didn't have any ideas, but he felt it was too troublesome, so he chose a different approach. Under these circumstances, Locke acted as a link, allowing them to work together, so they could get familiar with the team and see the results. After Locke left, Cordelia spoke first. "We have to verify the authenticity of the information. Leave it to me. Investigation is quite simple," Giselle said. "I can cooperate with you. I have a lot of connections in Mexico. If the information is confirmed, I can get all the necessary equipment, vehicles, and even transport planes." Damon said, "The quality is guaranteed, and the price is reasonable. We'll have to find the manpower for this operation separately, but we won't need too many." "I have a few friends," Vanessa said. "We've worked together before." Locke did not participate in their discussion. In fact, according to his estimation, the Cordes family's hidden funds were much larger than he had previously stated. The Cordes family has a large business in the United States, especially in recent years, accounting for 30% of the goods sold there, earning at least $100 million to $200 million annually. After deducting the expenses of maintaining staff and bribing police and officials throughout the United States and Mexico, their net profit over the years is at least $300 million. If the location Carlos described was true, even if only half of the money was hidden there, not to mention the volume, it would weigh several tons, requiring transport planes or cargo helicopters to transport it. If they succeeded, Damon would probably be thinking of retiring. Locke didn't care. He could command and lead troops even if he wasn't on the front lines. There was always a shortage of willing men, and trustworthy personnel were far more valuable. As long as they needed to launder the money, and didn't want to watch their money depreciate daily in the bank, and wanted returns that outpaced inflation, they couldn't escape Locke's influence. After all, they didn't understand finance and investment markets, let alone how to manage a company. Ultimately, they would rely on Locke to ensure the safety and even growth of their wealth. As for personal involvement, considering his net worth was already over $1 billion and expected to multiply several times over in 2 or 3 months, he didn't really need to do it himself. What if there was a scam? Chapter 142, Ace Agent turned super criminal. He returned quietly to New York. Thanks to the special treatment he'd received from the principal, Locke attended his undergraduate graduation ceremony after the final exam results came out. He then became a graduate student under Dr. Gate, just like Peggy. After completing his mission to destroy the Cordes family, Locke used the potential points he'd earned to increase his power to 200. Then, the system suddenly vanished, even the system panel vanished. Over the next few days, Locke called repeatedly, but received no response. Worried about the system changes, Locke also had to deal with Sky Fund affairs. Economic turmoil had begun in Europe, with exchange rates fluctuating in many countries, requiring Locke to remain in New York to manage the situation. "Locke, you finally have a day off. Can you please stop calling all the time?" Caroline Channing, who was walking ahead of him at an amusement park, said to Locke, answering the phone. "Why are you acting like my dad? It can't be helped. Things are very turbulent in Europe these days, honey." After explaining everything, Locke hung up the phone and embraced Caroline, giving her a gentle kiss. "Okay, I know the European economy is in trouble. Germany's growing power has disrupted the balance of power within the European community. In particular, Germany rejected the G7 summit's call for an interest rate cut and instead raised the discount rate to 8.75%. There's a sell-off of pounds and lira in the foreign exchange market, and a rush to buy marks, causing the lira and pound to plummet. My dad says this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But you said you'd have fun with me today, so forget about all this. Are all those guys you paid to work for nothing? As Martin Channing's daughter, Caroline had been exposed to him from a young age and naturally had some knowledge of economics. Okay, my bad. So what are we going to play next? Locke said with a smile. She pointed to a stuffed toy next to her shooting booth. I want this. Okay, Locke smiled and handed the owner $10. The owner handed her an air rifle, not the marble firing or electronic guns common in the East. After all, this was the Federation. Who would play with a toy gun? Would that be embarrassing? The target was about 20 meters from the shooting position, a small, rotating one. But this didn't faze Locke at all. He seemingly didn't aim carefully, yet he hit every one of his shots. Caroline's mouth dropped open in surprise. Locke lowered his air rifle and chuckled, "Beginner's luck, beginner's luck." The same words rang out from both of them, and Locke and the other person noticed each other. "You look like you know me," the girl across from him asked. "No, I'm just amazed by your charm." Locke wondered if he'd gotten into some kind of trouble. After all, it was impossible not to recognize Charlize Theron. Cypher, the beautiful woman on the other side, offered her hand, looking at him with a look of mutual sympathy. Locke raised an eyebrow, confirming that the woman before him was the superhero villain from the Fast and Furious series. After all, he'd seen almost all of Cypher's movies and had been a fan of her in his past life. Locke didn't know why she was there, but it was definitely no coincidence. Locke held out his hand. "Nice shot, you two." The owner handed Locke a full-length plush doll. "You're a great shot. You took one of my best prizes right after we opened." Locke smiled and handed the doll to Caroline. The doll was about the same size as Locke, and Caroline, holding it, was more than half a head shorter than the doll. Holding the doll, Caroline smiled happily, then looked warily at Cypher, who had just accepted the other doll from the owner. Caroline and Cypher each received an oversized doll and happily left the stall. The owner, having given away 2 large dolls at once, wondered if he had chosen the wrong time for the opening. After a brief exchange, Cypher calmly left the amusement park. Locke continued playing with Caroline, his mind preoccupied with the triple agent he had just encountered. Cypher had taken advantage of Locke's inattention to show his CIA credentials and say he needed to speak with him. This CIA ID reminded Locke of the film Atomic Blonde, about Lorraine Broughton, an agent of the British M16 who was later recruited by both the KGB and the CIA. When her identity was finally revealed, it was revealed that she was a CIA agent, leading Locke to suspect that the Cypher he had met this time was the same person as Lorraine Broughton. With this in mind, Locke made a few phone calls before returning his attention to pouting Caroline Channing and continuing to play with her at the amusement park. "Where are we going next?" Caroline asked curiously as they got into Locke's car after dinner. "Not kindergarten," Locke shrugged. Caroline didn't react for a moment, but after a moment's reflection, she grasped the implication, her heart skipping a beat. "Caroline, do you like carousels?" Locke suddenly asked back in the room. "Carousel?" Caroline was stunned. "I really loved it when I was little." As a little girl, she dreamed of riding the carousel that represented love, spinning forever. The thought made her heart skip a beat. Don't worry, it's not the kindergarten carousel." Before Caroline could finish, Locke sprang into action. They were both adults, so naturally, it wasn't kindergarten games, it was a world of upheaval and transformation. When Caroline Channing opened her eyes again, it was still dark. She found her phone and checked the time, realizing it was already the next night. Frowning slightly, Caroline turned sideways and gazed out the window. The stars shone brightly, and she felt a sense of appreciating the beauty of life. She finally realized that the things the girls she'd met had said were true. Meanwhile, Locke had just finished his meeting with Cypher and was thinking about the top-secret intelligence he'd just received. Lorraine Broughton had died during a mission. Locke had no idea when this person had become the supercriminal from Fast and Furious, but it was clear she had been a CIA agent not long ago. He wondered if she was still working for the CIA and had faked her own death, or if she had already defected. Regardless of the current situation, considering the future, this was likely another case of an ace agent being abandoned and turned supercriminal. This plot development was a very American one. But how had she targeted him? Did she think she could fool him with the CIA's cover? Various thoughts raced through his mind, considering how to deal with this Cypher. Then, with a ding in his mind, the system, which had been offline for over 10 days, finally came back online. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 The Laughter is Really Ugly. Name, Locke Lee. Primary occupation, Spacetime Player. Secondary occupation, Writer. Life level, Transcendent Level 1, Early Stage, Magical. Dimensional space, 16 cubic meters. Potential points, 100. Skills, Driving, Elite, Gunnery Martial Arts, Advanced, Meditation, Intermediate. Main world, Standard American TV series movie world. Anchor world, Fairy Tale world. Quest world, Searching. The relaunched system has undergone significant changes. Gone are the various stats, now consolidated into a single Transcendent Level 1 rating. This means you can no longer use potential points to improve various attributes. According to the description, potential points are now primarily used to upgrade skills, expand dimensional space, and search for quest worlds. Upgrading skills is self-explanatory. The so-called dimensional space is essentially Locke's previous storage space, but now, unlike before, it can hold only items and can now accommodate creatures. Expanding dimensional space consumes the same potential points as expanding storage space. 100 potential points per cubic meter. Furthermore, when searching for quest worlds, the system will search for quest worlds that match Locke's strength rating. After searching, Locke can choose to accept or reject the quest. Accepting the quest allows him to travel to the corresponding world, complete it, and receive the corresponding reward. The quests are issued by sentient beings within this world, potentially humans, animals, demons, or even world consciousnesses. There are also anchored worlds, which the system selects as welfare worlds for boosting Locke's power based on his own strength system. Locke only needs to spend 100 potential points as a travel fee to enter this world, trigger quests, and earn potential points upon completing them. Furthermore, according to the system, once a quest world has been entered and completed, it cannot be re-entered unless a new quest appears. However, if one is willing to spend potential points to anchor a world, it can also be turned into an anchored world. However, the travel fee varies depending on the world's power level. The 100 potential points required to anchor a fairy tale world is a highly discounted benefit, hence its name. Looking at the potential point requirement to anchor a world, Locke thought, wow, a full 10,000 points. The mere sight of it gave him a slight ache. Overall, the system change was a good thing. It meant Locke could freely change maps, no longer constrained by the power levels of the current world. Thinking of this, Locke looked toward the fairy tale world again, his heart aching. But he didn't act immediately. Instead, he went to the library, found a large collection of fairy tale books, and read them all. He then visited the farm, transported a large amount of gold, gems, diamonds, and other items stored there to the dimensional space, and visited Balthazar again, commissioning him to create a number of alchemical items with him. After 2 weeks of busy work, he finally chose to enter the fairy tale world. The space before him seemed to tear apart, revealing a passage. Locke pondered for a moment, then stepped into it. The void behind him instantly closed, and he stood alone on the empty road. He continued walking, and soon a ball of light appeared. As Locke stepped into it, his vision suddenly shifted. He found himself in a dark forest, with a faint moonlight shining from the sky. So where is this place? Locke wondered, taking in his surroundings. He found himself standing beside a dirt road. Even more curious, scattered peas lay on the ground beside the road. Hearing the faint sounds of wild animals in the woods, Locke pondered for a moment and followed the path of the peas. 10 minutes later, Locke arrived at a large wooden house. It was completely silent, and the door was unlocked. He pushed it gently and entered. An oil lamp was lit inside, but no one was visible. However, a birdcage stood by the door of one room. A parrot inside, upon seeing Locke, flapped its wings and began chirping. The parrot's voice was rhythmic, as if it were saying something. After a moment's hesitation, Locke smiled, released his magical sense, and headed to the kitchen. He retrieved a custom-made cross sword from the dimensional space and tapped it gently, quickly noticing the unusual echo. After searching around, Locke found an iron handle. Applying a slight pressure, A path appeared, leading downstairs, where flickering lights emanated. He descended step by step, discovering that the basement wasn't cramped but rather spacious. Numerous large wooden barrels were stacked, some of them laden with food and wine. An elderly woman in a coarse linen dress sat before one of the barrels. Upon noticing Locke, she began to ramble on. Locke couldn't understand a word of her words. Fortunately, he had been prepared. The gemstone on his magic ring shone, revealing the language. After casting a spell, Locke finally understood the woman's words. "Young man, get out of here. Get out of this house. You might lose your life." Locke raised an eyebrow, his mind stirring as he looked upward. A moment later, the sounds of men clamoring and a woman pleading rose from above. The old lady also heard the noise from above. Her face changed and she said to Locke, "Young man, come and hide in the barrel behind me. The robbers are coming and they will kill you if they see you." Locke did not move, but turned his head to look at the basement entrance. Then he saw a young girl tumbling down from above, groaning. When she recovered, she noticed Locke and was slightly startled. She looked at him with fear in her eyes. At this time, a long line of men came down the stairs, all of them with ferocious faces and carrying a variety of weapons. Naturally, they also saw Locke. After a slight surprise, they soon showed a ferocious smile. One of them said, "We didn't expect that we would have guests here. Dear friend, how should we entertain you?" At this time, the old lady stepped forward and said, "He is just a lost traveler, let him go." "Shut up," the robber yelled at the old lady again, and then said to Locke in a joking tone, "Uninvited friend, how do you like to die? Strangled by a rope? Or poisoned to death by drinking poison wine?" At this time, a robber next to him said, "Boss, why not beat him to death with a stick and then make it into dried meat? Don't you have to bring some things when you go to those villages? I think dried meat is also good." "Ha ha ha. You bastard is smart for once. You thought of such a cruel and interesting method. Let's do as you say." The bandit leader stared at Locke complacently. "Don't worry, I am a kind robber. If you have any last words, you can tell me. I promise not to help you complete it." "Ha ha ha." As the bandit leader laughed, the other bandits also laughed, looking at Locke as if he were prey to be slaughtered. "That's a terrible laugh." Chapter 144 Target Golden Apple. "That laughter is so ugly." Locke, who had been calmly observing the bandits, said this calmly, stunning the still glowing bandits. The next moment, Locke moved and vanished from the spot. "Who gave you the courage?" With each word, the cross-sword in Locke's hand flashed a cold light. "In front of me, you're laughing so ugly." By the time Locke finished his words, each bandit had been pierced by a deep sword wound on their necks. Warm blood spurted out, staining the basement floor red. Disbelief, fear, and despair still lingered in each bandit's eyes. As Locke wiped the blood from his cross-sword and sheathed it, they fell to the ground one by one. Having mastered the art of guns and cannons, Locke's marksmanship, mixed martial arts, and cold weapon proficiency were all integrated into the skill. Now, wielding the cross-sword, Locke was still able to dispatch his foes with unparalleled precision and swiftness. "No!" At this moment, the old woman uttered a shrill cry. Looking at the bodies scattered on the ground, she hugged the bandit leader and burst into tears. So this is the story of the bandit bride, Locke thought, recalling the fairy tale he had read, looking at the old woman and the girl brought back by the bandits. Then he looked at a wooden barrel behind the old woman. Sure enough, a girl climbed out of the barrel. Looking at the slain bandits, she said, "Hero, have you come here specifically to eliminate these bandits?" "It was just a coincidence," Locke said calmly. "It was just bad luck that they met me, and I'm tired of it. Anyway, thank you for eliminating these bandits. I'm the daughter of a miller from a nearby village," the girl who had emerged from the barrel said. "My father wanted to find a good marriage for me, and then a young man proposed to me." Sure enough, the girl was describing the story of the bandit bride. The bandit leader, under the guise of a proposal, deceived the girl's father into getting engaged. Afterwards, he invited the girl to visit him. Because she instinctively sensed something was amiss with the bandit leader, she left peas as a trail marker along the way. Upon arriving, she encountered the old woman. The old woman was actually the bandit's mother, but she was kind-hearted and, while the bandits were gone, hid the girl in a barrel. "Thank you, great hero, for saving me from the abyss of darkness." "Yes," Locke nodded non-committally, saying, "Just call me Locke." Looking at the fallen bandits, Locke thought to himself, "What a bunch of weaklings. Killing them only gave him 100 potential points, essentially the cost of the journey. Quests can also be triggered in the fairy tale world, and it seems to be somewhat related to those stories, but Locke still needs to learn more about this world. With this in mind, Locke looked at the girl, a miller's daughter. She might be able to glean more information about this world. The overall social structure of the fairy tale world resembled that of medieval Europe. Locke asked the miller about the general situation, but the miller himself knew more than he could. So, a few days later, Locke bought an ordinary horse in the village and headed for the nearest city. Staying any longer wouldn't yield any further information, and the miller's daughter seemed reluctant to leave. But Locke had no desire to stay and inherit the mill. He wanted to continue pursuing the opportunities in fairy tales, not only for the potential rewards of quests, but also for the magical items. During his recent meditation, Locke discovered that his meditation efficiency in this world was 5 or 6 times higher than before. Clearly, the system had a reason to choose this world as a welfare world. Even after Locke began teaching Peggy magic, he felt a little uneasy because he noticed that Peggy was practicing meditation even faster than he was. If that were the case, he might be surpassed by Peggy in just a decade or two. He had long noticed the golden apples from his fairy tales. Many people had heard the legend of the golden apples, citing the earth goddess Gaia as a wedding gift for Zeus and Hera, who brought a large tree from the west coast. A tree laden with the golden apples, Zeus assigned the 3 daughters of night to guard the sacred garden where the apples were planted. They were also assisted by the 100-headed dragon Ladon. Among the most famous myths related to the golden apple, the most famous is the battle between the 3 most beautiful goddesses in Greek mythology, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, for the golden apple. Zeus appointed Paris as the referee. To secure the golden apple, the 3 goddesses each promised Paris a promise. Hera promised him supreme power, Athena offered him wisdom and strength, enabling him to become a hero hailed by the world, and Aphrodite promised him the love and marriage of the most beautiful woman in the world. In the end, young Paris made a choice that Locke considered foolish, yet true to manly nature. He gave the golden apple to Aphrodite. Later, with Aphrodite's help, Paris abducted Helen, queen of Sparta, thus triggering the Trojan War. The 3 goddesses fought for the golden apple because it was a gift reserved for the most beautiful goddess, and each vying for the title of greatest beauty. But the value of the golden apple itself, which Zeus had specifically assigned dragons to guard and gifted to the goddess, was undeniable. If a golden apple tree were guarded by 100 dragons, Locke wouldn't have even considered getting his hands on it. But in this fairy tale world, there was another opportunity. Several of the fairy tales Locke had read mentioned golden apples, and the one that most captivated him was the one that described the king who planted a golden apple tree in his palace. However, the fairy tale didn't mention which king it was, and treasures like the golden apple were strictly confidential, making discovery difficult. Locke's search was like searching for a needle in a haystack, and 3 or 4 months passed unnoticed. One day, he arrived in a city and found an inn. In those days, most inns were 2-story, with the first floor serving as a tavern and the second as accommodations. As Locke opened the door, he was greeted by a cacophony of noise. The first floor was brightly lit, and the patrons drank cheap ale and boasted of their experiences and heroic deeds. These people were filled with the smell of alcohol and sweat. Taking advantage of the alcohol, they extended their hands to the maids passing through the crowd, which attracted shouts of anger or scolding. Locke ordered a meal, chose a seat in the corner and sat down, watching everything in the tavern. At this time, the door of the tavern opened, and a young man with an obviously angry look walked in, staring at the owner at the bar with a gloomy face. I thought who it was. It turned out to be our generous Mr. Will. A man in the tavern recognized the young man and shouted, "Last time, Mr. Will used a magical table that could continuously produce delicious food to treat us to a luxurious meal." Magical table. Hearing this, Locke perked up and looked at the young man. Chapter 145. You are a smart person. Everyone in the inn looked at Will because of the man's words, and Will angrily walked over to the fat owner sitting at the bar. "Welcome, Mr. Will. I didn't expect you to visit my tavern again today. Would you like a glass of wheat beer first?" A playful glint flashed in the fat owner's eyes, but a kind smile was on his face. "I'm sorry, I forgot. Mr. Will owns the magical gourmet food table. How could he possibly be interested in what I have here? Damn you, bastard. Stop pretending," young Will roared angrily. "You shameless thief. It was you who stole my gourmet food table. Don't frame me, Will." A cruel look flashed in the innkeeper's eyes. I admit that I envy you for owning that gourmet food table, but everyone saw you take it away when you left the next day. You want to frame me? No way, but since I left you, my table has never produced gourmet food again. You must have replaced it, young Will argued. That's hilarious, Will. Who knows if you hid the table yourself to frame me and extort money from me? I'm telling you, I'm not someone you can easily bully, the innkeeper declared, his face etched with rage. You're slandering me. Furious, Will was about to leap over the bar to strike the innkeeper. But the next moment, he was restrained by two of the innkeeper's men. Let me go, you thieves! Robbers! Swindlers! I'm going to the sheriff to file a complaint against you. Will struggled relentlessly, unable to break free from the innkeeper's men. You better worry about yourself, the innkeeper said casually. You're causing trouble here. Even if the sheriff comes, you'll be the one to be punished. Now, throw him out. With the innkeeper's command, Will was thrown out. He still tried to charge back in, but the innkeeper's men stopped him and gave him a beating, forcing him to leave the inn helplessly. Watching Will leave and then glancing at the new task, Locke quietly left the tavern and followed Will. Once they were alone, he called out, Hey, Will, who are you? My name is Locke, Locke asked. I heard at the inn that you have a little dining table that can create delicious food. I did have one, Will said, gritting his teeth. But because I was too vain and careless, it was stolen by that damned robber. I swear, that innkeeper, I'll teach him a lesson and get my little table back, but you can't do anything to him, can you? Locke said. Will opened his mouth, then nodded grimly. Yes, that innkeeper has several men, and I'm no match for them. Actually, I'm quite curious about your story. Can you tell me? Locke asked. It all started when my father kicked me out. Will recounted the story, which was exactly the same as the story of the fairy tale table, the golden donkey, and the stick. Will's father, a tailor, was driven from home after listening to goat. Later, he apprenticed with a carpenter, eventually receiving a table that could automatically conjure up delicious food. Hearing this, Locke suddenly noticed something. Your father can understand goats? That's a skill everyone in our family possesses, Will said. We can understand the thoughts of animals, so, this ability is innate. That's right, Locke was a little disappointed. He had initially wondered if Will's father had some special magical item or other. If it was innate, it must be a bloodline. Fairy tales are full of magical creatures, and naturally, some people inherit magical bloodlines. Locke saw little value in the ability to speak with animals, since he could also understand them using magic. Thinking of this, he turned the topic back to the gourmet table. Let's talk about your gourmet table. My teacher accidentally found the gourmet table. It possesses special magical powers. By chanting a spell and imagining the food in your mind, it can create exquisite meals, Will said. My teacher gave me the gourmet table after I completed my apprenticeship. He also told me that it can be used 3 times a day, and with it, I can eat delicious food every day. It's indeed a magical item. I'm quite interested in it. Locke suspected that the gourmet table was a magical alchemical item. While its functions might not be very advanced, it was quite practical. You want the gourmet table too, Will said cautiously. Of course, I can help you get it back from the innkeeper, Locke said, but then I want to buy it from you. There were 3 items in this fairy tale, none of which Locke considered of great value. Besides the gourmet table, the golden donkey could spit out gold coins, but Locke had no shortage of gold. Finally, there's the automatic hitting stick. Will's brother used it to reclaim the gourmet table and the golden donkey from the innkeeper. Locke can craft similar magical items himself, but the only one that's more amazing is the gourmet table. At least Locke can create such a magical item. So Locke wants to take the gourmet table and study it. In fact, if the mission hadn't required him to help Will kill the innkeeper and reclaim the gourmet table, Locke would have simply snatched it from the innkeeper, without even having to discuss it with Will. You want to buy the gourmet table? No, it's very important to me, Will said, shaking his head and refusing. Don't worry, I won't take your things for free. Why don't you hear my price first? Locke smiled and said, how about 1,000 gold coins? 1,000 gold coins, Will was shocked. I am a traveler who likes to travel around and often have to sleep outdoors. The gourmet table allows me to taste delicious food in the wild, Locke said slowly, and you have such a lot of money. You can own your own manor and have a considerable income every year. With this money, you don't have to worry about not having delicious food. Not only delicious food, with money, You can also live a rich life, marry a beautiful wife, and have a beautiful family. This is a very reasonable deal. I do." Faced with such a choice, Will quickly made a decision. "I am willing to agree to your conditions. As long as you help me take back the gourmet table, I am willing to sell it to you." "You are a smart man, Will," Locke said with a smile. Chapter 146 How the King Was Killed. Killing the innkeeper was a piece of cake for Locke. Of course, before that, Locke had found the gourmet table from him. Once in his hands, Locke could sense it slowly absorbing the surrounding magic. Sure enough, this gourmet table can only function continuously because it constantly gathers magic, Locke concluded, then began to examine it carefully. However, he couldn't immediately discern the alchemical techniques used to create it. However, Locke wasn't in a hurry. He knew he'd have plenty of time to study it later once he got it. Locke returned the gourmet table to Will. After completing his mission, he gave Will another 1,000 gold coins in exchange for the gourmet table. Gold coins were of little importance to Locke. Not only had he already amassed a considerable amount of gold within the dimension before entering the fairy tale world, but even his occasional robbing the rich to help the poor schemes had earned him a substantial amount of gold from the fairy tale world's nobles. With the innkeeper defeated, Locke no longer cared about what would happen next in the story of Will's two brothers. He set out on his journey once more. It wasn't until he arrived in a new country and heard about the Wicked Queen and Snow White that he thought of the Queen's magic mirror, which could answer any question. The fairy tale world is vast, with numerous kingdoms. It would be difficult for Locke to find which king owned a golden apple tree, but if he asked the magic mirror, he might be able to get the answer quickly. With this in mind, Locke made his way to the royal city and quietly approached the palace under the cover of night. The palace was built on a hill in the center of the city, overlooking the entire city. Before he could sneak into the palace, he sensed a powerful magical force. The moment he sensed this magical force, Locke fled the palace as quickly as possible, knowing that the queen had noticed him and that any stranger who sneaked into the palace would be unable to hide from the queen. The queen was far more powerful than Locke, making it extremely difficult for him to sneak into the palace, let alone find the magic mirror. The queen would likely hide such a valuable item in a secret location, heavily trapping it. Given the strength of the queen's magical powers Locke sensed, obtaining it would be incredibly difficult. "It seems I have to take another route," Locke thought, and began to plan. Several months later, Locke arrived at the palace gates. Today, he would meet the Wicked Queen, rumored to have murdered the king. Having joined the royal army, he had earned an audience with the queen and received a knighthood by beheading the enemy commander. Armored guards led the way, ushering him into the hall. Aside from the nobles and officials standing on either side, the first thing he noticed was a young woman. Even Locke, who had seen many beauties, could not help but admire her beauty. Her skin, as delicate as snow, was rosy as blood, her long hair was a shiny black, and her sapphire eyes studied Locke with curiosity. Then Locke's gaze moved upwards and saw the rumored vicious queen sitting on the throne, and his heart couldn't help but beat a little faster. Compared to the still somewhat immature Snow White, the queen was a ripe peach. She was gorgeous, and there was a hint of laziness in her eyes as she looked at Locke. Every gesture and movement was full of charm. The queen was wearing a dark red loquet puffy dress and a pearl necklace around her snow-white neck. When Locke saw it, he thought to himself, "This necklace is really nice, the pearls are so big and white, she is indeed worthy of being a queen." With a broad mind, who said she was jealous of Snow White? In Locke's opinion, the only thing that Snow White surpassed a queen was that she was younger. This meeting was actually a reward for Locke. The queen noticed that Locke's gaze was a little unreasonable, but she didn't seem to care much. With a decent smile on her face, she announced the reward for Locke. The reward was nothing more than a title and some wealth. Locke bowed in thanks, kissed the queen's hand as a sign of respect, and then said, "It is an honor to be recognized by the kingdom. I am willing to continue to contribute my strength to the kingdom and point my sword at its enemies." The queen nodded in satisfaction at Locke's attitude. "I will remember your bravery. I also have a special reward for you. Please follow my maid to my study and wait for a while, as you command." Locke nodded. After leaving, he followed the maid to a room adjacent to the main hall and waited quietly. About half an hour later, the door opened and the queen entered. Locke was about to bow when the queen said, "That's not necessary. It's rare for someone of your kind to visit. Why not tell me your purpose?" "I'm a magician of unknown origin." Locke's heart tightened. For this encounter, He had carefully concealed his magical powers, not revealing even a trace of them, and even prepared props to conceal them. He had originally planned to seek a position within the palace, such as head guard, giving him free reign in the palace, which would have made it easier to locate the magic mirror. However, the queen saw through his plan so easily. He calmed himself, looking at her and saying, "Your eyesight astounds me, queen. You saw through my disguise so easily." As he spoke, Locke pondered that the queen's reluctance to attack him immediately meant there was still room for negotiation. "You're just a novice magician. I wonder where you got the courage to try to hide from my perception." The queen took a seat in the study, gently stroking a crystal ball on the desk. "Now, tell me, were you sent by the Vatican?" "The Vatican? Of course not." Locke was taken aback, then began to think rapidly. Having spent the better part of 6 months wandering the fairy tale world, Locke had naturally heard of the Vatican, whose teachings on faith in a single God were very similar to what Locke knew. In this war between kingdoms, the opposing kingdom also adopted the Vatican as its state religion. It seemed the Queen and the Vatican had a strained relationship. "So why have you come?" The Queen leaned forward slightly, revealing a large expanse of white. "Since the Vatican is your enemy, my queen, I am willing to help fight it," Locke said. "Ha ha ha!" The Queen laughed at this, and the slight tremor in her chest made Locke feel dizzy. "It seems you are still an ignorant little thing. Did your teacher teach you?" The Queen looked at Locke and smiled. "How dare you, a mere wizard, say such things? Better tell me your purpose and stop trying to be clever." "I've been searching for something, but I've found nothing so far." Locke knew he had no other choice and could only speak carefully. "So, it seems you're interested in my magic mirror." The Queen looked thoughtful. Locke looked at the Queen cautiously. He didn't know that the Queen's possession of the magic mirror was not a big secret, otherwise how would these rumors have spread? The magic mirror's use required very high requirements. Even if an ordinary person obtained it, they could only use it as an ordinary mirror, unable to answer any questions. Of course, the Queen had already set numerous traps, and she wasn't worried about anyone stealing it from her palace. "It seems that this thing is very important to you. So, what are you willing to sacrifice to find it?" The Queen smiled at Locke, her charming demeanor making Locke think that she was truly a demon. He wondered how the king had been killed by the Queen. Chapter 147. Which side are you on? "I'm willing to do anything I can for you," Locke replied to the Queen's question. "I have a treasure I'd like to give you." "What kind of treasure?" The Queen smiled at Locke. Noticing that Locke's eyes were constantly fixed on her pearl necklace, the Queen didn't mind his impropriety, but rather enjoyed the way Locke fell under his spell. Although the Queen hadn't yet expressed any threat, Locke could sense an omnipresent, invisible pressure, knowing that she was a formidable sorcerer, far more terrifying than the fairy tales depicted. Judging by the Queen's power, the 7 dwarfs were likely quite formidable, otherwise why would the Queen choose to disguise themselves instead of attacking directly? For the past 6 months, Locke had mostly encountered ordinary people. Even those with a touch of the mystical were no match for Locke, which had made him somewhat arrogant. But now, facing the Queen in person, Locke realized that the world of fairy tales is far more complex. "This is something I accidentally created while alchemizing. If you apply a little to your body while bathing, it creates a foam like milk. Evenly apply the foam to every inch of your skin, and it will easily wash away all dust and leave it smoother and firmer." Locke pulled a crystal bottle from his waist and said, "I believe only you, the most beautiful person in the world, are worthy of using something like this." He had long prepared this item to please the Queen. It was actually a magical body wash. Since the Queen had recognized his magician, there was no need to fabricate a story when explaining its origins. "Your words delight me." The Queen's eyes lit up upon hearing about the body wash's effects. She looked at Locke and said, "As for your little gadget, leave it here for now. You can go down first, as you command." Locke nodded and respectfully departed. Leaving the palace and returning to his quarters, Locke opened his stats panel again. He glanced at his meditation technique, which was close to upgrading, and then at the 300 potential points he had accumulated from completing quests in the fairy tale world. The system's use of potential points to upgrade skills is quite user-friendly. When Locke first entered the fairy tale world, upgrading his meditation required 1,500 potential points. Now, with Locke's own magic power constantly growing, the required potential points have been reduced to 300. Normally, in the fairy tale world, Locke could upgrade his meditation within a month at most. But today, facing the Queen's pervasive pressure, Locke felt it would be best to upgrade his meditation now. At least, if he angered her, he would have a better chance of escaping. With this in mind, Locke tapped on the meditation method. Instantly, Locke felt a surge of magic power converge on him. He quickly began meditating, drawing this magic power into his body and letting it flow slowly. When Locke opened his eyes again and looked outside, it was already dawn. Feeling the magic power surge through him, Locke clenched his fists. Although he was still a long way from the Queen, he felt a sense of peace. Seeing that daylight had already approached, Locke packed up and had just finished breakfast when a palace guard arrived, ordering him to the palace. Arriving in the palace's study, Locke met the Queen again. She had changed into a simpler white dress for the day and sat at her desk, one hand resting on her round chin as she watched Locke enter. Locke then noticed that the Queen appeared to have just finished a bath, her hair was still damp, and there was a faint fragrance. It seems the Queen has tried it, and from the looks of it, she seems quite satisfied with the shower gel. Noticing that the pervasive sense of oppression surrounding the Queen had diminished considerably, Locke knew his strategy was working. As expected, no matter how powerful the Queen was, she couldn't escape her natural love of beauty. "I'm very pleased with the treasure you presented me yesterday. Was it crafted through your alchemy?" The Queen's words were languid. "I need the recipe, it would be my pleasure," Locke said, smiling. He stepped forward and handed the Queen the alchemical formula he had prepared. Taking the formula from Locke's hand, the Queen, noticing where Locke's gaze was fixed, curled her lips into a charming smile that captivated everyone. She carefully reviewed the recipe and frowned slightly. "It seems your bloodline is very special." Locke was slightly taken aback, unsure of the Queen's sudden words. "You should know that ordinary mortals cannot become magicians. Only those of us who inherit legendary bloodlines can awaken our bloodlines and inherit the ability to control a magic," the Queen said slowly. "From the alchemical formula you gave me, I find that your method of using magic is unusual. I can also sense that the magical fluctuations within you are somewhat different. So the alchemical method you use must be derived from your unique bloodline." After the Queen's explanation, Locke finally understood that most magicians in this world descend from the bloodlines of gods or epic heroes. Strictly speaking, magicians in this world are more like sorcerers who rely on bloodlines. In fairy tales, without bloodlines, it's impossible to become a magician. Therefore, the Queen had never considered that Locke's magic system was so different from what she knew. Locke made shower gel by analyzing the ingredients and using magic to trigger chemical reactions to reconstitute the desired substances. In modern times, the principles behind this are largely public knowledge, so they wouldn't be difficult for Locke, but for the Queen, it was difficult to understand. "I need more." Confirming she couldn't master the art of crafting, the Queen immediately said to Locke, "Start crafting when you return. The more the better. Tell me anything you need." Locke nodded, and the Queen continued, "I have another task for you. If you can complete it, I'll let you use the magic mirror to find what you're looking for." "I'm happy to serve you," Locke said with a bow, quietly waiting for the Queen to speak. "After my husband died, he left behind our daughter, Snow White. I raised her carefree and hired the best teacher in the land." The Queen spoke slowly, "But I recently discovered that teacher was actually a spy sent by the Vatican." At this point, the Queen's tone grew serious. "Under the spell of that damned liar, Snow White believes I killed her father. And because of the rumors spread by the Vatican, many say I'm jealous of her beauty and want to kill her. Now, she considers me her mortal enemy, her caregiver." Hearing the Queen's words, Locke was struck by a thought. Was the next plot point about me killing Snow White? Which side would he be on then? If the story unfolded as it should, if he just let Snow White go and waited for the Queen to be eliminated, would he have the chance to reclaim the magic mirror? Chapter 148 Delay for One Night. Time passed quickly, and more than half a year later, in the palace's study. "I heard Snow White has been asking about the king's assassination." The Queen stared at Locke intently. "Do you have anything to explain? Isn't that a good thing?" Locke said, without a trace of worry. "When the king was assassinated, the assassin, after being apprehended, said he had ordered it, Queen. Despite her gag order, many nobles have heard about it. Snow White also heard about it from her former teacher. Her inquiries about the details of the incident only show that she is doubting what she once believed." Locke didn't actually know whether the Queen was responsible for the king's assassination, but the truth had nothing to do with him. He was simply guiding Snow White's doubts. All of this was to fulfill the Queen's condition. Sure enough, upon hearing Locke's words, the Queen smiled. I originally had no hope you could change Snow White, but keeping her alive is far more valuable than killing her, so I allowed you to try. It seems you truly are the one guided by destiny. So, I will keep my promise and use the magic mirror to help you find the item you seek. Thank you, Queen. I can't wait. Locke's face also broke into a smile, his long efforts finally paying off. Ha ha ha. You're really impatient. Come with me. The Queen smiled and stood up, leading Locke to her chambers. There, Locke finally saw the Queen's treasure, the magic mirror he had long coveted. It was placed on the cabinet beside the Queen's bed. The magic mirror wasn't the full-length mirror Locke had seen in movies, but a round mirror the size of a face. The entire mirror was silver gray, and the frame was engraved with intricate patterns. Locke could tell these patterns were a special kind of magic pattern, but he couldn't identify the purpose. The Queen approached the magic mirror and placed her hand on its surface. Locke felt an endless stream of magic energy emanating from her hand, which was then gradually absorbed by the mirror. Locke watched the Queen's movements from the side as she explained, each use of the magic mirror consumes magic power, and the wider the range, the more magic power is consumed. With your magic power, it's simply impossible to have the mirror scan the entire continent. Locke nodded. The mirror began to glow, and a sinister, goblin-like head emerged. Alright, the Queen withdrew her hand and said to Locke casually, you may now ask the mirror. Seeing the Queen's relaxed expression, Locke couldn't help but gain a deeper understanding of her power. From what he could sense, the magic power the Queen was transferring to the mirror was already 3 times his own total magic power. Why don't you ask quickly? The Queen urged, looking at Locke. Okay, Locke looked at the Queen, hesitated for a moment, and finally gritted his teeth and asked, Magic Mirror, let me ask you, do you know where there is a tree that grows golden apples? Golden apple. Hearing this name, the Queen looked at Locke with a hint of amusement. I don't know of any tree that grows golden apples in this world, the magic mirror said after a moment. The magic mirror's answer startled Locke, and he couldn't help but exclaim, how is that possible? There must be a golden apple tree in this world. There's indeed a golden apple tree in this world, but it's not in a place that the magic mirror can detect, the Queen interrupted. What? Locke looked at the Queen in astonishment. There are many hidden places in this world, protected by magic, and these places are beyond the reach of the magic mirror. I've used the magic mirror to search for golden apple trees more than once in the past, but each time I found nothing. The Queen looked at Locke and said slowly, I didn't expect your goal was the golden apple. No wonder you sought the magic mirror's help, Queen. Have you also searched for the golden apple? Locke looked at the Queen. Indeed, it's a treasure that, when consumed, preserves youthful beauty, strengthens blood, and enhances magical affinity. The Queen smiled and said, luckily, I later accidentally obtained one, but I ate it right away. So where did you get it? Locke couldn't help but ask. I've sworn to the gods never to reveal this. The Queen shook her head and looked at Locke. And even if you knew where it was, with your current strength, you wouldn't be able to obtain the golden apple from the keeper. Locke had calmed down by now. He thought of the king and prince in the fairy tale who owned a golden apple tree. They were likely extraordinary, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to protect the tree's secret. He then looked at the Queen again. He still couldn't accept that all his efforts had been in vain, but it was clear that the Queen knew where the tree was. Even if she had said her current strength was insufficient, that didn't mean she wouldn't have a chance in the future. I cannot tell you anything about the location of the golden apple tree, the Queen, perceiving the meaning in Locke's gaze, slowly said. Unfortunately, the magic mirror cannot help you, so you'll have to find it on your own. His eyes flickered for a long moment, and Locke sighed. Then, can I ask the magic mirror for more details? Of course, the Queen said, knowing Locke wouldn't give up easily. But the magic mirror's power is insufficient for another search, and I won't replenish it for you, as that would be further wasted effort. Don't worry, I just want to know the results of this search, Locke said. That's no problem, the Queen nodded, pointing at the magic mirror. Mirror, I want to ask you, which of the places you can't explore are near a king's palace? Just tell me which country they are, Locke asked. It seems you've gotten some information from somewhere. The Queen looked at him with some surprise after hearing Locke's questions. Locke smiled faintly and didn't answer. Since the Queen knew where the golden apple tree was, there was no need for him to hide it. He simply looked at the magic mirror, waiting for an answer. The magic mirror then named 6 countries. Locke memorized them one by one and said to the Queen, Your Highness, I think I need to leave. I have a long journey coming up, Of course, the Queen smiled and sat down on the bed next to her. Looking at Locke, she licked her bright red lips and held out her hand. "But I think you wouldn't mind staying here for a night. It has always been my honor to serve the Queen." Locke smiled and took the Queen's hand. He leaned over, and what came into view was a sea of white. Chapter 149, When you show courtesy to others, you must ask for something in return. The next morning, when Locke left, the Queen was still in a dream. From the Queen, Locke learned much about the fairy tale world's past, primarily about the gods and the church. Over 700 years ago, the Holy Light tribe descended upon this world and waged war with the old gods. Mount Olympus fell, and some of the gods perished in battle, while others were gravely wounded and slumbered, never to awaken. The Holy Light tribe also suffered a difficult time, severely damaged by the gods and still to this day, yet to recover. Over these 700 years, the Church continuously expanded its faith, gradually becoming the sole faith of many nations across the continent. It also established a Holy Light tribe's Inquisition. Exorcists trained by the Inquisition roamed the continent, harnessing the power of Holy Light to pursue the bloodlines of the gods. The Queen was once pursued by these exorcists. Although her growing power meant that ordinary exorcists were essentially courting death, they continued to appear, a constant presence everywhere. This was until the Queen received a revelation, traveled to this country, met the king, and after marrying him, she successfully took control of the country and began a formal confrontation with the church-controlled nations. With her immense power, the Queen nearly doubled the kingdom's territory, forcing the Vatican to concentrate its forces there to maintain the current balance of power. The Vatican's primary influence lies in the eastern states, most of which are under the Vatican's influence. Furthermore, the Vatican also maintains influence in parts of the central and western regions. The kingdom, situated at the intersection of the east and central continents, invaded several key Vatican-controlled states, curbing the Vatican's rapid growth and drawing significant attention. The 6 kingdoms the magic mirror had given Locke were mostly located in the central or western regions. Following the planned route, Locke continued onward, unhurried. The golden apple tree was there, and it wouldn't disappear. Crucially, the Queen had stated that its guardian was formidable. Therefore, Locke's plan was to locate the golden apple tree, end his time travel, and return to the American TV series. Continuing onward, Locke left the Queen's kingdom and arrived at a neighboring kingdom. This kingdom was currently at war with another nation, a fact not surprising to Locke. In this era, wars between nations for land and resources were frequent, though the scale varied. After arriving in this country, he gradually heard about the king's reputation, which suddenly made him very interested in this country. Because the king of this country is famous for his wisdom, it seems that there is nothing in the world that he doesn't know, and it seems that no matter how secret the matter is, it can't be hidden from him. So people asked him why he knew so many secrets, and every time he answered that it was the wind that brought the secrets to his ears. These rumors reminded Locke of a fairy tale called White Snake. After arriving in the capital of this country, Locke first found a hotel to stay in. Unexpectedly, the next day, a guard from the palace came to visit. "Dear Sir Locke, it is an honor for you to come to our country. Our king heard about your arrival and specially prepared a sumptuous dinner for you. Please be sure to attend. Has your king also heard of my reputation?" Locke was also a little curious. "Lord Locke, during the battle, you single-handedly slew the enemy commander, who was protected by 100 knights. Your prowess has spread far and wide, and naturally, we have heard of your renown." Locke nodded, feeling slightly relieved. While information might travel slowly in this world, Locke had previously been ennobled in the kingdom of Lawrence for his military exploits, making him quite famous. It wasn't surprising that word had reached the ears of the neighboring king. "I thanked the king for his attention to me. Please tell him I will definitely attend the banquet," Locke agreed. In fact, ever since hearing the legend of this king, he had harbored some suspicions. If everything turned out as he imagined, perhaps he could obtain a golden apple without even searching for the golden apple tree, and even learn its location. It all depended on Locke, hoping to encounter the king's guards. Perhaps the king truly valued Locke, and to welcome him, the evening banquet was a grand occasion. In the palace's main hall, court musicians played smoothly, and waiters served carefully prepared food and the palace's treasured wine. The kingdom's nobles, dressed in finery, chatted, others danced gracefully on the dance floor. Locke, also meeting the king, renowned for his wisdom, for the first time, was dressed in rich robes. His beard had turned gray, and wrinkles etched the corners of his eyes, but he remained erect and erect, his eyes gleaming with cunning. "Welcome, Sir Locke," the king embraced Locke, welcoming him. "Your Majesty, thank you very much for your hospitality. Everything here is so beautiful. I feel that coming to your kingdom is the best thing I have ever done." He had a feeling the king before him was plotting something, but he remained composed and engaged in a leisurely conversation. The banquet was a feast for both host and guest, and when it concluded, Locke, at the king's invitation, arrived in the reception room in the palace's backyard. The two sat down face to face, and Locke knew this was when the action would begin. "Sir Locke, I do have a small question," the king asked tentatively. "Your Majesty, feel free to ask any questions you may have." Locke took a sip of the black tea offered by the maid, then placed a cup on the coffee table in front of him. Sir Locke achieved great military success in the kingdom of Lawrence and was even granted nobility. "Why did he suddenly leave and come to our country?" the king asked tentatively. "Could it be that the queen was very kind to me? It was she who granted me the nobility, which is why I stayed there for over a year," Locke smiled. "It's just that my nature prefers adventure and seeing different landscapes and people. A monotonous life is boring to me." "Ha ha ha. I see, Sir Locke. It seems you love adventure and are a natural hero," the king smiled and said. "I've heard that in distant mythological times, powerful heroes who achieved outstanding achievements were valued by Zeus, the king of the gods, and were invited to join Mount Olympus and become one of the gods. Sir Locke, you are a powerful hero, with a heart that never stops challenging yourself. If you were in mythological times, you might have won the appreciation of the king of the gods." "That's just a legend," Locke smiled and shook his head. "And I'm not even close to being a hero, Sir Locke. You are too modest. I heard that your strength can be compared with that of a giant, and your swordsmanship is unmatched. No swordsman could withstand a single blow from you. It is because of your existence that the kingdom of Lawrence was able to defeat the enemy army so quickly. You are too kind. The victory of the war is still thanks to the queen." Locke knew very well that there were many powerful people in the enemy army, but these people were restrained by the queen. Now it seems that they are all from the Holy See. At that time, he was just an ordinary knight. The enemy did not know his strength and was careless, which allowed him to successfully launch a sneak attack and complete the feat of killing the enemy commander. "Humility is a good virtue, but Sir Locke, I have something that requires your bravery," said the king. "Your Majesty, are you referring to the war your country is currently engaged in?" Locke quickly understood the reason. "You wish me to help you defeat the enemy. Indeed, the king of that country is actually a traitor and a thief. 100 years ago, he betrayed my ancestors and occupied our former capital. The war between us continues to this day," the king said with a hint of resentment. "If it weren't for the sudden appearance of a brave and capable general in their army, I would have had a chance to win the war. With your help, I would definitely be able to defeat them. As long as you agree, Sir Locke, I am willing to let you choose a prosperous city as your fiefdom." Sure enough, when you give a courtesy, you must have something in return, Locke thought to himself. He was about to refuse. He had little interest in participating in the war between the two countries, but then he thought of his previous speculation and changed the subject. "You know, I am not a noble of the kingdom of Lawrence. If I rashly get involved, I am afraid it will have a negative impact. I need to think carefully." Chapter 150 Contradiction. Seeing Locke trying to shirk his responsibility, the king frowned slightly, then smiled and said, "I understand your concerns. You can stay in the palace now and take your time to think about it." "It's my honor, Your Majesty," Locke nodded and agreed. After finishing his conversation with the king, Locke was led by the guards to a room in the palace to rest. After the guards left, Locke left behind an illusion. His real body had used invisibility and quietly came to the king's room. He watched as a guard brought a covered dish to the king. After the guards left, the king opened the lid and revealed what was on the dish, the corpse of a white snake. The white snake had not been cooked at all and was still raw. The king simply took a knife and fork, cut the white snake in half, and put a piece of bloody snake meat into his mouth. The king's behavior confirmed Locke's suspicions. He was the king from the fairy tale about the white snake. But Locke couldn't help but grumble, "Eating white snake raw? He's not even worried about the parasites." Of course, the king had been eating raw snake meat for years without issue, so he probably didn't have to worry about it. Locke also knew that it was thanks to this snake meat that the king was renowned for his wisdom. After feasting on the snake, the king began to speak softly. Soon, a small mouse scurried out, making a squeaking sound. A conversation ensued, and Locke soon understood that the king was using the mouse to spy on him. Sure enough, this is the source of the king's wisdom. Thanks to this white snake meat, the king has acquired the ability to converse with animals. Locke smiled and quietly left, returning to the room the king had assigned him. As expected, not long after, he noticed the mouse enter through a rat hole in the room and peek into a corner, observing Locke. With a sneer, Locke pretended to notice nothing, cleaned up, and went to bed. For the next few days, Locke's surroundings were bustling with visitors, mice, birds, ducks. The scene was bustling with activity. The king, brimming with pride, believed he controlled Locke's every move, unaware that his every word and action was under Locke's magical surveillance. The king was a common man, and without a magician in the palace, it was impossible for him to detect Locke's spell. These days, Locke received the king's warm hospitality and earnest requests, extolling the rebelliousness of the rebels and urging Locke's help in their destruction. As time passed, Locke pretended to waver, seemingly convinced by the king's words, but inwardly he despised him. He thought his words were pitiful, but didn't Locke know that the rebellion was the result of the king's ancestors' extravagant and licentious behavior, which angered the people? After all, in order to guide Snow White, Locke had thoroughly mastered the history of the surrounding countries. Besides monitoring the king, Locke had also been busy these days, searching for the source of the white snakes the king consumed. He discovered that a special knight delivered the snakes to the palace daily. Following this trail, Locke discovered that the snakes were delivered to the knights by a different person each day. After delivering the white snake, these men departed, unexpectedly sneaking into the royal city where the king's supposed rebels were located. Unable to leave for long, Locke merely used a magical sigil to determine their approximate location. Determined to visit someday. Then, one day, while eavesdropping on a conversation between the king and queen, he overheard something that suddenly brought a smile to Locke's face. The queen had told the king that a ring was missing. After pondering this, the king began to suspect Jim, one of his most trusted and honest guards. Jim seemed to be the guard who stole the king's white snake flesh in the fairy tale. He hadn't missed him, and following Jim meant he'd have a chance to encounter the three crows. In the fairy tale, it was the crows who helped Jim find the golden apple. If he could find the crows, Locke would not only have the golden apple, but also the location of the golden apple tree. After some thought, Locke left his room and went to the palace garden, pretending to admire the flowers. Jim was there. After a while, he saw two guards arrive and approach Jim. Seeing this, Locke walked over and asked, "What happened, Lord Locke?" "Jim stole the queen's ring, and the king has ordered us to bring him in for questioning," a guard replied. "From what I know, Jim is a very honest man. He doesn't seem like the type to do something like stealing the queen's ring." "Is this a misunderstanding?" Locke feigned surprise. Jim then quickly replied, "It wasn't me. I didn't steal the queen's ring, it was the king's order," the guard insisted. "The king ordered us to take you to him." Looking at Jim, who looked aggrieved and panicked, Locke said, "I believe Jim is not the type to steal. Let's go to the king and clarify this matter." The guard, knowing Locke was a distinguished guest of the king, did not attempt to stop him, and the group approached the king. "Your Majesty, I absolutely do not have the queen's ring." "You know I'm not that kind of person," Jim loudly defended himself upon seeing the king. "Jim, I've always believed you were an honest man, so I trusted you and gave you free access to the palace." The king looked at Jim and said, "But sometimes, greed can make people do irrational things. When the queen's ring was lost, you were the only one who had been to the queen's courtyard. Who else could it be, Your Majesty? Please believe me. It really wasn't me. My loyalty to you is unmatched." Faced with the king's questioning, Jim was at a loss for words and could only continue to plead his innocence. At this time, Locke spoke up, "Your Majesty, from what I know, Jim is an honest man. He didn't steal the ring. Perhaps it just fell somewhere by accident. If you look carefully, you might be able to find it." The king was thinking of asking Locke to help and didn't want to directly refute him. After a moment of consideration, he said to Jim, "Jim, I'll give you one night. If you still can't find the ring by tomorrow, I will execute you." Jim was initially pleased, but then became concerned again and left dejected. After Jim left, Locke began to bid farewell to the king. "Your Majesty, the Queen of Lawrence has heard of my story. She seems reluctant to see me interfere in another country's war, as it could bring trouble to the Kingdom of Lawrence. Therefore, I regretfully decline your request." The king, already in a bad mood, grew even more grim upon hearing Locke's words. He said stiffly, "I see. Then let it go. When will you continue your journey?" As expected, the king seemed to be sending him away. Locke, unconcerned, replied, "It's a pity indeed. I plan to pack up and leave tomorrow." After bidding the king farewell, Locke returned to his room and quietly observed Jim. Just like in the fairy tale, Jim had overheard the ducks' conversation and found the ring in their stomachs, clearing his suspicions. Locke realized that Jim, curious, had secretly eaten the king's white snake meat, and thus, like the king, had acquired the ability to understand animal language, which allowed him to discern clues from the duck's conversation and find the ring. After finding the ring in the duck's stomach, the king went to the other ducks and, after listening to their conversation, realized that it was indeed the duck that had eaten the ring. Realizing he had wronged Jim, the king felt a pang of guilt and offered to make amends, agreeing to a condition. However, after consuming the white snake, Jim understood the origins of the king's reputation for wisdom and his respect for him diminished. Feeling disheartened by the accusation, he decided to leave the palace. The king finally gifted Jim a horse and some money. Jim happily left the palace, confident that his ability to understand animals would allow him to make a career. Meanwhile, Locke also bid farewell to the king. The two met by chance at the city gates and, after a brief conversation, decided to travel together. Suddenly, the system popped up another task, to help Locke marry Jim, a task that made Locke frown, as he realized it conflicted with his plan to obtain the golden apple. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.